It's been 3 days since my father was laid to rest. As Ryan Luica, I've been hustling like crazy, just trying to sort out the estate he left behind. And honestly, it's an absolute train wreck. I'm officially the Baron of the Luca territory now. But trust me, there's nothing glamorous about it. The land is impoverished and food is running low. No merchants even bother coming around here, simply because there's nothing worth trading for. Sure, we have some mineral veins, but mining them is just too damn difficult. On top of all that, the Kingdom of Norrance is packed with hot-headed fighters, meaning bandits roam our borders with total impunity. I can't afford a militia, so law enforcement is non-existent. No security means no revenue coming in, and no revenue means no soldiers. It's a brutal cycle. I set down my quill and let out a sigh. Normally, a baron would employ a chief administrator to handle this mountain of paperwork, but we're far too broke to hire anyone. My dad's funeral bled me down to my very last gold coin. Still, it's not all doom and gloom. I've got a secret. I'm actually a reincarnated earthling who crossed over into this fantasy realm, and I possess a pretty unique perk. Young master, please enjoy some tea. That's Elulo, my personal maid. She stuck with me since we were kids. As she serves the tea, her white skirt sways gracefully. She really has grown up beautifully. I've got to admit, if I made the move, she'd share my bed in a heartbeat. Suddenly, a status window materializes before me. A digital interface visible only to me. Lulu Marshall. Tactics 10. Strategy 73. Loyalty 100. Special talents none. Rank C. This display screen is my ultimate cheat code. In a world ruled by magic and alchemy, yet there's no record of anyone ever seeing an RPG style. Status display. Combat might represents raw speed and physical power, while tactics covers intellect and arcane. Attunement. As for loyalty, well, Ellie's stats are totally maxed out at 100. She's 100% ride or die for me. Taking a small sip of my black tea, I realized that even when everything is going to hell, the flavor proved that highborn life still has some perks. Are you doing okay, young master? Ellie inquired in a gentle voice. Pretty much everyone else around the estate addresses me as my lord nowadays, but she still sticks to young master, just like she always has. She knows exactly how bad things look. If we can't scrape together the troops' payroll soon, our final 100-man guard division is going to walk away. I'm managing, I replied to her. I do technically have a father-in-law out there, Baron Fedra, the guy ruling over the neighboring lands. We've crossed paths plenty of times, and I always called him uncle. He was always all smiles back then, constantly insisting I should hit him up if I ever ran into trouble. But now that my dad has passed away, I'm not so sure what his old-time generosity is actually worth. I'm definitely not banking on him. Then, the storage vault crossed my mind. The spot where every single past leader of the Luca dynasty stashed away their personal belongings. There might actually be some valuable items hidden in there. The storehouse turned out to be blanketed in cobwebs and packed with junk. Old paintings, dusty vases, the kind of stuff former family heads overpaid traveling merchants for just to appear sophisticated. Turns out most of it was total garbage. A renowned portrait, originally bought for 50 gold pieces. We'll be lucky to fetch 10 silver coins today. High society is purely about keeping up appearances, and appearances are dictated strictly by rank, not actual taste. I secretly judged how my ancestors blew their cash. I unsheathed a fancy-looking noble blade, but it was completely rusted out. Total hype, zero substance. Ditching it, I grabbed a dusty little chest instead. It had a silver-gray eagle carved right onto it. Something about the vibe felt familiar. Tucked inside was a hefty gold medallion, a gladiator's crest, gorgeously engraved with a golden eagle. Okay, now we're talking. Norrance is a kingdom that absolutely worships raw power. Every year, they throw a massive tournament where nobles, peasants, and even other races show up to watch. Though only legal citizens of Norrance can actually play. The champion walks away with this crest, and with it, you get free perks at any small shop across the realm, insane discounts at the major trading houses, and the real kicker, the right to ask the king himself for one reasonable favor. This was hands down the absolute most priceless item in my whole vault. My grandfather, Edward, actually won the thing. He used to be the top sword saint in the entire empire. Granted, in this day and age where battle aura has faded, that title doesn't really carry much clout anymore. He fell in combat years back, leaving my dad to inherit the barony at just 16. The exact same boat I'm in. The thought gave me the creeps. Are all the Luca men cursed to kick the bucket young? I made a mental note to hold off on having kids until way later down the road. All those freebies and deals. only applied to the original winner anyway. So those sweet perks vanished with Granddad. All that's left is its clout as a trophy, plus that one royal favor from the king. Honestly, if this token could score me 1,000 gold coins, I'd trade it away in a heartbeat, even if other nobles treat these things like holy relics. Yet my final squad of guards is about to walk, since I'm flat broke. Honor doesn't feed anyone. Butler, get the carriage ready. The elderly butler rushed right over. He spotted the box in my hands and instantly recognized Grandfather Edward's seal. He parted his lips as if to speak, but ultimately he just nodded in agreement. My lord, I shall prepare the coach immediately. Right before our departure for the capital, Yahello fussed over my formal attire, smoothing out every single crease with her tiny, fair hands. She gently set the noble top hat onto my head, and I caught a whiff of her lovely fragrance as she leaned in close. Let's just say that soft touch was a sweet bonus. I gave the butler his final directives. This journey to the capital would take at least 2 or 3 weeks. It's quite a trek from here. I stepped inside the carriage, which bore the Luca family emblem. Yahello joined me, naturally. She's my personal maid, so she goes where I go. En route to the capital, we would pass through Fader's domain. That was actually my initial destination. If Baron Fader could lend a hand, maybe I wouldn't have to part with Grandfather's crest. I'm not overly sentimental about it, but keeping a family heirloom would be great, if I can pull it off. The Kingdom of Norrance has vast lands but poor soil. Hardly anything grows, yet the realm is rich in minerals. The adjacent kingdoms of Yade and Rima constantly buy or from Norrance, at least when there isn't a war brewing. Crossing from my borders into Fader's territory, the stark contrast was immediately clear. It was pretty humble but barren. Fedra owned arid fields and fruit orchards. For a minor noble, that's practically loaded. Along the dirt roads, I spotted a few scattered farmers and the occasional traveling peddler with a donkey or some old horse. We made it safely to the Fedra estate. I sent my coachman Oxiu ahead to announce our arrival. Dropping by unannounced is a bit tacky among the elite, but our families used to get along quite well. Back when my father was alive, I figured they wouldn't just slam the door on me. Boy, was I wrong. Oxiu returned looking totally rattled, his eyes darting all over. What's wrong? I asked, already sensing the worst. My lord, the butler kicked me out. Oxiu stammered. He claimed, I was only pretending to drive for a noble. Yahello was absolutely furious. Fedra's butler knows damn well who Oxiu is. He drove for your father plenty of times. I kept my cool, catching on immediately. They simply had no interest in seeing me. I had underestimated how fast people's loyalty chills. Once a man passes away, let's move Oxiu straight to the capital. I didn't say another word. That butler would never dare turn away a baron's visit without his master's green light. After all, my driver represents the honor of the Luca territory. This was a blatant, calculated insult. Yahello barely uttered a word for the rest of the trip. She was quietly seething inside. Baron Fedra's daughter was betrothed to me, yet they wouldn't even grant us entry past the gates. It was a total slap in the face, and she took it personally. As our journey brought us closer to the capital, the surrounding villages and estates looked much wealthier. By the time we finally hit the royal city, massive stone walls stood tall alongside broad paved streets. The contrast with our dirt-soaked village roads was just mind-blowing. Structures of every shape and size packed the metropolis. Once we cleared the security check at the main gate, we finally reached the antechamber of the Grand Palace. The receptionist handling the sign-ins caught sight of me and spotted my low-ranking baron insignia. A nobody baron trying to score FaceTime with the king? Usually, these guys pull every trick in the book to ditch you. Name, Linwei Luca. Objective, requesting a formal meeting with the king. Justification, that's when I flashed the champion's token. The golden eagle emblem made the guy's jaw completely drop. A gladiator's crest. Respected baron? What can I do for you? His entire vibe changed on a dime. Anyone carrying that specific golden eagle warrior emblem bound to be backed by some serious aristocratic house. The Grand Games are the biggest deal in the whole realm. They only hand out a single token each year. And since this nation was first established, barely a few hundred have ever been distributed. I require an audience with His Majesty. Right away, sir. I'll pass word along immediately. Hold on a moment. No more stalling or pointless hassle. The attendant rushed back within mere minutes. I hadn't even finished sipping my tea. Honored Baron, the king will receive you in the side chamber. Giving a quick nod, I left Yahello waiting outside. Dragging a personal servant before royalty would have been a massive sign of disrespect. This marked my very first encounter with the sovereign, and up close, He looked older than I had anticipated. A commanding, middle-aged figure occupied the throne, his flaxen hair partially obscured by a heavy crown. His intense glare locked directly onto me. Well now, Baron Luca, you come presenting a Golden Eagle Champion's token. What is your request? Only a rare few barons in all of history had ever laid hands on such an insignia. Most belonged to royalty or elite aristocratic houses. This particular one came from the king's own father. Dropping down on one knee, I gave a proper noble salute and spoke with deep respect. Your Majesty, I'd like to trade this crest for a single competent person and a bit of gold. King Luke XIII looked slightly caught off guard, yet he gave his reply. You may head over to the realm's reserve knight order and pick out one royal knight in training. Plus, I will grant you 1,000 Norns gold coins to take back this eagle. The royal knight order answers straight to the king. The reserve knights here are top-tier talents, scouted from all over the kingdom. Plenty of them are second sons from noble families. Try to make a name for themselves. That's just the way it goes here. Only the firstborn gets the inheritance. The others lose their noble status once they hit adulthood and have to carve out their own path. Some end up joining merchant or adventure guilds, if their families can back them up. The unlucky ones basically just turn back into commoners. Honestly, I'm pretty grateful for my own luck. My father didn't have other kids, so taking over the barony was a breeze. A broke territory is still way better than having no land whatsoever. As for my mother, I've never laid eyes on her, not even in my earliest days. When the knight commander led me to the practice grounds, you could practically feel the tension. The trainees took one glance at me and clocked that I was merely a baron. Serving a baron compared to serving a duke? Yeah, those are completely different leagues. Some looked spooked, others looked totally repulsed, and a couple actually hid behind their buddies. It didn't faze me. With King Zillick XIII's official green light, I could have drafted an earl's second son if I really felt like it. Not that I actually would, though. Gotta admit, these elite royal guards had serious stats. I started reviewing them one by one. Rambo, Might 74, Tactics. 40, Devotion 0, Rank. A, Perks, Sprint, Spear Mastery, and One-Handed Sword Mastery. Arc, Might 68. Tactics 56. Devotion 0. Rank B, Perks, Hawkeye Longbow Mastery, and Insane Strength. Every single one of them brought something to the table, and their scores were pretty neck and neck. Besides, that stuff can always be leveled up later. But then I paused right in front of this one guy. Norrell, Might 96. Tactics 80, Devotion 0. Rank A, Perks, Equestrian, Hawkeye, Arms Mastery, and Combatant. Norrell's numbers were totally off the charts, way ahead of the pack, even outclassing those highborn second sons. He just stared back at me, completely cool. I could tell the guy was hungry for success. But since he was a commoner, he'd clearly been throwing his trials on purpose. He didn't want to make the noble kids look bad. This one I barked. The Grand Commander stepped over. Norrell, as of today, you are officially discharged from the order. You report to Baron Linway now. Norrell didn't even flinch. He struck his chest in salute and bowed. Understood, Commander. Little did I know, Norrell wasn't actually bummed about the reassignment at all. He'd already mapped out his own strategy. A baron's land usually sits right on the kingdom's frontier, where outlaws run rampant and wars always strike first. If he could take charge of a guard detail under me, he'd get plenty of shots at racking up military merits. Sure, the lion's share of credit goes to me as the Lord, but if he managed to make a name for himself and dominate a gladiator tournament, climbing to a low-tier noble rank wasn't out of the question. He had personal motives for chasing that title. Riding in the carriage, I was preoccupied plotting how to invest the funds. A sack of 1,000 Norrens gold pieces was tucked in the corner. I had to clear my men's back pay straight away, which would set me back a few dozen coins. Next, I was thinking of dropping 500 on iron weaponry. Right then, Elias piped up, "Young master, wouldn't it be wiser to bring on a blacksmith?" The realization hit me instantly. Cultivating our own smith would save a fortune down the line, since iron goods cost an arm and a leg in Norrens. A standard iron blade runs about 1 gold piece. Toss in chainmail and a buckler, and it takes roughly 10 gold to outfit a single trooper. And even then, that only buys equipment. That's barely better than a drafted peasant's. Don't forget, this is a magical realm. In a proper clash, grunt forces like that don't even qualify as cannon fodder. The true elite houses deploy massive heavy cavalry divisions. And past that, you've got griffin squadrons, spellcaster units, and even alchemical golem legions. Those are trump cards that swallow mountains of cash. But grooming a blacksmith is no walk in the park either. Raw talent is absolutely everything. The upside is, My special skill lets me pinpoint individuals with hidden gifts. The downside is, my current funds wouldn't even cover a master smith's hiring fee, let alone anything high-end. Meanwhile, word spread fast that the royals bought a golden eagle. Gladiator's crest straight from my hands. It didn't take long to reach Baron Fedra. He just chilled, sipping tea and stroking his mustache. The sole reason he even played nice with my dad was to get his hands on grandfather's gladiator crest. My father, Ryan, was a powerhouse fighter, and Fedra totally used him, making Ryan whip his own soldiers into shape and sending him to clear out frontline bandits. The look of family came from a military lineage, while the Fedras were strictly merchants. Fedra commanded hundreds of light cavalry and roughly 1,000 guards. Meanwhile, we couldn't even afford to feed ours. My engagement to Fedra's daughter, Lena, was a total spur-of-the-moment thing, made right after my dad bailed Fedra out of a tight spot. Years ago, but now that my dad's gone, Fedra just views me as a terrible investment. No merchant is going to double down on a deal he knows is a losing one. I watched from the shadows as Norrell handed out wages to my garrison troops. I scrutinized every single one using my special skill. Marshall, 20. Tactics, 18 grade, E-. Hanson, Marshall, 23. Tactics, 10 grade, E-. And just kept going. Every last one was absolute garbage. Rock bottom stats across the board. And their loyalty levels were pathetically low, too. They're exactly the type of soldiers who desert the second things get messy on the battlefield. I could see Norrell looking pretty miserable himself. The mere thought of commanding these guys was clearly giving him a massive headache. Honestly, the fief state was even worse than he feared. Shattered ramparts, chipped swords, and blunt spears. Most of the men couldn't even scrape up enough cash for decent leather armor, much less some chainmail. If he had to lead this crew against actual bandits, he'd probably ditch his dream of rising to a commoner noble right then and there. Once everyone was paid, Norrell came looking for me. My lord, he faltered, clearly having a hard time finding the right words. Norrell, I get what you're trying to say. I interrupted. This is the very last squad left in the territory. From here on out, they answer entirely to you. So don't slack off on their drills. He looked stunned that I'd hand over control so fast. But even with solid training, it would take at least a solid month just to get them into decent shape. What about the gear, he questioned. Fair point. Drills mean squat without the right hardware. Properly equipping a respectable defense force would rack up thousands of gold coins. And taking one look at me, he obviously doubted I had that kind of cash. I'll have your gear ready in a month, I assured him. Until then, just focus on the drills. He wasn't entirely sold, but since I was his master, he just gave a nod and went along with it. Honestly, though, I had absolutely no clue how to deliver on that vow. I reviewed the local demographics, and pretty much everyone was just basic working class, miners and woodsmen, with zero education and utterly useless stats. I let out a deep, heavy sigh. The Lilu placed a cup of tea right onto my desk. Young master, you seem displeased. She always catches on to my mood shifts. I just secured 1,000 gold coins and a gifted night. So why was I still so stressed? It's nothing. Oh, I replied. By the way, she tacked on, word is a bunch of slave drivers hit the province earlier today. Might be someone useful in the mix. I shot her a startled look. Lulu, how do you figure out I needed skilled hands? She smirked. Well, stocking up on ready-made gear is pricey. If we secured our own smith, we'd cut down costs big time. The troops' gear is practically trashed, and funds are running low, am I right? Boasting a tactical rating of 73, she was way sharper than those reserve knights. Back at the capital, she caught the flaws in the guards' equipment, just from tagging along with me today. Clever girl. Human traffickers. Passing through Luca territory wasn't anything new. They were mostly foreign traders, hailing from the Yade or Rima realms, traveling deeper into Norrance to do business. I headed out to meet the merchant, a slender, sharply dressed, middle-aged guy. He scanned me and Yahello behind me with a sycophantic grin. I could tell he was already sizing up Yahello like a piece of property, which rubbed me the wrong way. He picked up on my irritation fast enough. He didn't want any friction with a local ruler on their own turf. He guided me toward a line of 6 large wagons, draped in black tarps. What kind of thrall are you after? Baron? Fighter types? Companions? Any specific race in mind? I tuned out his marketing pitch. Most arrogant aristocrats would bite at those choices, both of which would command a massive premium. But I wasn't taking the bait. Just show me the standard slaves. Any race is fine. He seemed slightly bummed out, yet he still guided me toward the 3rd wagon. The moment he yanked the drape aside, A bunch of girls recoiled like terrified little kittens. Well, actually we're part feline. Half-bloods displaying traits of the Naze clan. I gave him a quick scan. Nanazi, combat 7, stratégie 40, rank D. Specialty, night vision. Akina, combat 40, stratégie 40, rank C. Specialty, beast taming. She possessed a fierce, savage gaze, staring me down with pure defiance and barely suppressed rage. Too bad that slave restraint around her neck was something she could absolutely never break out of. Decent enough, but not what I was after. I really needed someone with blacksmithing skills, and my budget was way too tight to waste on anything else. Right then, I spotted a shape huddled up in the corner of the pen. Saruka, combat 5, strategy 99, rank A. Specialties, magic affinity, wisdom's blessing. And well-traveled. My heart literally missed a beat. Her fighting capability was pretty much non-existent, but a strategy rating of 99? That was completely insane. I was suddenly extremely intrigued, despite keeping my eyes locked on that cat girl. Cowering back in the corner, Saruka, I made sure to maintain a total poker face. What's the damage for these slaves? I inquired nonchalantly. The scrawny merchant grinned. 10 Norris gold pieces apiece, my lord. Take 3, and I'll knock 20% off. He flashed 3 fingers with a totally pained look, as if giving that deal was physically hurting him. I put on a show of hesitating, though on the inside, I was totally hyped. Most of these cat girls weren't even of age yet. So scrawny and sick, no regular buyer would touch them, unless they had some really bizarre tastes. They weren't worth anywhere near 10 gold pieces. Never mind, I'll pass, I said, giving a wave of my hand. The merchant panicked and flipped his script instantly. Tell you what, buy 1, get 1 free. Let's call it a friendship discount. Inside, I was thrilled, but I put on a hesitant face. Well, all right. I motioned toward Quina first. Out of all the cat girls, she seemed the healthiest and easily looked the best. The dealer gave a knowing nod. Naturally, the Baron goes for the gorgeous one. Next, I pointed at Saruka over in the corner. The trader's expression went blank with shock. Saruka hadn't eaten a bite in 2 days, and looked like she was on death's door. If I hadn't taken her, he probably would have just dumped her somewhere. Either way, he made an absolute killing on this deal. He bought these cat girls from frontier troops for a single silver coin a pop, and now he was pocketing 100 times that profit. Once the sale wrapped up, the merchant got a lot friendlier. Need anything else, Baron? I swear by the goddess of light, these slaves are completely devoted. They'll never turn on you. I smirked to myself. Well, obviously they won't. Those slave collars will detonate their heads if they try. Got any dwarves? I inquired. It's common knowledge that dwarves are the finest metalworkers in the land. If he had any on hand, there was a solid chance I'd find a proper blacksmith. He nodded and yanked the tarp off a different wagon. Inside, several dwarves were slumped around, looking just as battered as the cat girls. Granted, their attributes were slightly superior, and the majority of them possessed the smithing perk, too. That's when my gaze drifted to a skinny little dwarf. Biglon Marshall, strategy 30. Rating 50, A-tier talent, successor of the Courage Forge. Artisan soul, blacksmith. His base attributes weren't mind-blowing, yet the system still gave him an A. It's pretty clear that perks carry a lot of weight here, not just core stats. That one, I pointed. I was so hyped, I completely forgot to ask about the price. The trader put him up for 10 gold pieces. Dwarves fetch a higher price than cat girls, solely due to their forging capabilities. Mind you, most slave drivers can't actually force them to fall in line, even with restraint collars. 10 gold was double what the merchant initially paid. But for me, it was an absolute steal. Done. I quickly counted out 10 glittering coins. The trader then requested my name, mentioning he'd keep an eye out for any specific requests I had. I gave him my introduction and slipped a bonus gold coin right into his palm. If you hear any interesting rumors or spot exotic races, give me a heads up. His face beamed. But of course, the esteemed Baron Linway, Malone is ever at your service. I could tell he'd instantly upgraded his opinion of me. A big-spending aristocrat who pays well and lacks arrogance. That's exactly the kind of network worth building. I ordered Oxy, the driver, to transport the slaves back in the coach. As a nobleman, sharing a carriage with slaves was a no-go. Social standing matters, but I wasn't going to make them walk. Call a bit of basic empathy from my days on Earth. Strolling back alongside LLO, I surveyed the desolate fields and brainstormed some innovative ways to revitalize the land. Before long, the ultimate solution hit me. No way around it. I'm just a regular guy from Earth. I'm no engineer, and I'm definitely no science whiz. The single unique thing about me is my ability to spot other people's hidden talents. I can't even throw a punch. Young master, You're really growing up. Elia Lu blurted out of nowhere. I stared at her, totally lost. I mean, you're turning into a respectable baron. You didn't just buy a few random, low-tier slaves. You also won over a well-connected merchant. Your father never used to bother with traders. Oh yeah, right, I muttered. I had no idea how to explain to her that. I wasn't being tactical at all, I was just winging it. Suddenly, a random thought popped into my head. With her high strategy stat of 73, Yahello would actually make an incredible administrator. She could take a massive load off my shoulders. Yahello, would you want to be my administrator? Her eyes went wide, and then they started tearing up. Young master, is Yahello not doing a good enough job as your maid? I blinked. That was definitely not the reaction I anticipated. No, of course not. I just think you have a real knack for this sort of thing. I only wanted you to give a shot. She cast her gaze downward. Elia doesn't want to manage things. I just want to stay right by your side. I didn't press the matter. If she wasn't into it, I wasn't going to force her. Even though I felt a tiny bit let down. It's been a few days since I purchased the slaves. Today, I organized a big lunch for everyone. My own large table, a separate spot for Norl, and a smaller setup for the slaves, Aquina, Biglon, and Saruka. We had a meal of stir-fried rapeseed blossoms, served with some white bread and a massive bowl of potato soup. Took a mouthful, kind of lacks flavor. But hey, salt and pepper are pure luxury items around here, so the chef really had to skimp on them. Back home on Earth, this would pass for the most basic food you could imagine. Yet for a local baron, this actually qualifies as high-end. Knights only get stuck with wheat cakes or bran bread, while common folk and slaves have it way worse. Chilled, rock-solid, black bread that you practically need a knife and water just to force down. Honestly, you could weaponize the stuff in the summer. Go ahead, dig in, I muttered, glancing around at the group. Not a single soul was touching their food. Norl and Yahello were doing all right, but the slaves looked completely petrified. They were likely sweating that. This was their absolute final meal, before I pulled something awful on them. Why on earth would an aristocrat serve them his exact same meal? It just didn't compute for them. Norl clearly found the whole situation bizarre, too. A nobleman dining in the same space as slaves is considered totally improper, though at least we weren't sharing the exact same table. Elia didn't care. She's been sharing meals with me for ages now. Biglon, the dwarf, cracked the code first. If this really was his execution feast, he might as well enjoy the ride. He crushed everything on his plate in seconds, chugged his potato soup in a single breath, and then eyed Saruka and Aquina's untouched. Portions like he was ready to clean those out next. Aquina started taking bites after that. Saruka was the final holdout, timid and wary. She only raised her utensil once she noticed everyone else chowing down. I gave a nod, fully satisfied, motioning for the chef to serve Biglon. Another plate. Saruka looked tons better by now. Honestly, when she first got here, the poor cat girl was totally out for days. I literally had to fetch a priest to treat her, which sent me back about 7 or 8 gold pieces. Whatever, it's done. Besides, she's crucial for my upcoming plans, so I'm not going to skimp on her. Once lunch wrapped up, I got right back to it. There is seriously a never-ending pile of chores. I sent my butler out to track down some iron or traders. But as it turns out, the folks right here in the Luka region had loads of iron or this whole time. The mines were just rented out to others, since my family lacked the cash to run them. I dropped 600 gold coins just to buy back the iron stocks, plus another 100 for blacksmithing tools and gear to set up the forge. Whatever cash was left went straight into daily maintenance and fixing up the estate. I just collapsed into my seat and let out a sigh. Man, you never realize how pricey things are until you're the one footing the bill. I seriously need to figure out a quick way to make bank. A bit later, I found out what had been happening with the slaves behind closed doors. Mind you, I wasn't there to hear it myself back then. Saruka and Aquina were resting in a cozy room, tucked into warm beds, with clean linen. No more begging for stale crusts of dark bread. Just a few days back, this kind of comfort was completely beyond their wildest dreams. They belonged to the very same catfolk village. They were supposed to have ordinary lives, getting married, raising kids, and growing old in peace. But instead, Rima's forces completely wiped out their home. Those who fought back were wiped out. The troops committed horrific atrocities against the grown women. The sole reason this pair was left alive was because an officer figured they were way too young and scrawny to handle any rough handling, so they got passed off to human traffickers instead. Aquina spoke up in a low voice, confessing she'd always been envious of Saruka. Back when the village was peaceful, gorgeous Saruka was the one all the local guys fell for, while Aquina was just a rowdy tomboy who loved hunting and playing rough. Once they were both taken captive, A part of her felt a messed up sense of equality. She absolutely loathed humanity for what those grunts did to her folks. Yet, right here was a human kid, providing them with cozy beds and solid meals. She couldn't wrap her head around my angle. Maybe I was just priming them up, only to strip it all the way down the line. But they'd already been through absolute hell. What worse could I possibly do to them? With those slave bands locked on their necks, they couldn't strike back, let alone in their own lives. What Aquina hid from Saruka was that she'd spotted me handing a holy man 7 or 8 gold pieces just to keep Saruka alive. That was way more than I'd shelled out for the pair of them. Only Saruka received that kind of care. Aquina just got the standard rations like everyone else. She kept that little detail to herself, wanting Saruka to sweat it out with the same dread she felt, rather than feeling privileged. Even in this place, after everything they endured, Saruka always seemed to catch the breaks, and Aquina was completely over it. Big lawn, I shouted into the massive forge. After a solid week of heavy eating and drinking, that stocky dwarf had really taken a liking to me. He could see I wasn't like the usual aristocrats he dealt with. The esteemed Master Biglon has arrived, he declared, and I could tell he genuinely meant it. Between the great food, the fruit wine, and the freedom to roam around, he was living way better here than he ever did, back home in his own dwarf village. So, working under me didn't bother him one bit. He already figured out why I'd brought him to the forge. What do you think of this smithy? I inquired. It's pretty nice. I let out a sigh and put on a gloomy face. You know, the Luika territory isn't exactly swimming in cash. Surely you wouldn't want the land to go broke and lose all that white bread and fruit wine you've been enjoying, right? That hit him right where it counted. He'd gotten pretty accustomed to the cushy life. Master, I really want to help, but the weapons I craft might have a bit of an issue. Ordinary folks might not actually be able to handle them. I didn't quite catch what he meant by that, so he offered to give me a demonstration. While he got to work, I checked the status window again. His loyalty stat had risen to 70, high enough to start placing some trust in him, though I was still pretty curious about that air of courage. Forge talent. It took quite a while. He repeatedly heated, hammered, and purified the iron, gradually shaping it into a blade. Once the final quenching was done, a thick, massive iron sword was resting on the table. It is finished, master. Now I finally understood what the catch was. I tried to grab the sword, but I couldn't even budge it. Talk about embarrassing, but the thing was just too heavy. You probably need a serious level of physical strength just to swing this thing around. I called Norl over. He picked it up effortlessly, and his eyes completely lit up. He flipped it over in his grip, totally obsessed with it. This is a killer blade, he remarked, way better than any retail junk. But the weaker troops won't even lift it. So that was the catch in Bigland's eyes. Puny humans couldn't wield his dwarf-crafted gear. My lord, could this one be mine? Norl inquired after a brief pause. He'd been getting by with a cheap, easily shattered blade until this moment. Go for it. He thanked me a dozen times, and I watched his loyalty stat jump from 70 to 80. It had been totally stuck at 70 ever since he entered my service. One solid sword finally moved the needle. Biglon, keep pumping them out just like this, I ordered. He let out a sigh. Fair enough, but master, your knight is ridiculously strong. Normal troops can't swing my steel so effortlessly. I grinned. I get it, just keep hammering away. You'll get paid for your work. 1 silver piece for every sword of this caliber. Biglon gawked at me like he was seeing things. A silver per piece meant 10 swords equal to gold coin. He could make 20 daily, clearing 2 gold coins a day. Plus, I was supplying all the raw materials, while he was just a slave with 0 rights. Bless you, great master. He made a deep bow, full of pure gratitude, and his loyalty shot up by another 10 points. At this pace, I could probably ditch the slave collar, and he still wouldn't bail. On the stroll back to the estate, Norl was practically hyped. My lord, that dwarfsmith gear is the real deal. Reckon your men can handle swords like that? I questioned. His eyes flashed with excitement. Not quite yet, but once I whip them into shape, absolutely. If we could outfit the entire 100-man garrison with gear of that caliber, thieves would definitely reconsider. Armor can wait, I said, tapping his shoulder. I'm banking on you. I won't disappoint you, my lord. It was clear Norl was reconsidering his view of me. When he initially learned, I'd bartered my granddad's gladiator crest for him, plus 1,000 gold coins. He had been gutted. He thought I'd thrown away ancestral honor. And upon witnessing the pathetic state of my garrison, along with their shattered gear, he'd felt even more miserable about his future. But today completely flipped the script. I tracked down a gifted dwarfsmith and set him to work. Perhaps this young baron from the backwaters of the realm wasn't a total lost cause after all. If I kept pulling off clever moves like this, Maybe Norrell wouldn't even need to strive for life as a self-made noble. He could just directly ask me for what he desired. Once I become powerful enough to grant it. Vigeland converted 600 gold coins worth of iron ore into 200 heavy long swords in a mere week. Watching rows upon rows of leather-wrapped blades being hauled off felt totally surreal. I guaranteed his pay and intended to keep my word, though it would have to wait until I offloaded the surplus. My unit only consisted of about 100 men, so 100 swords would do the trick. Actually, probably fewer. Not everyone was capable of swinging these things. For what I gathered, you needed a minimum of 30 in martial strength, just to barely swing one, and 40 or higher to wield it properly. When I went back to check on the troops, I couldn't believe my eyes. Their attributes had skyrocketed. Guys who used a score in the low 20s for martial arts were suddenly hitting 35 or even 38. Top-tier ratings shot way up from E to E+. Their loyalty leaped from the 40s straight into the 50s. That drifting, spacey look they used to have had shifted into something way intense. Every single one of our 100 sentries now boasted a combat stat clear above 30. Norrell seriously knew a thing or two about whipping troops into shape. Armed with actual blade steel, they could easily clean up average outlaws. Sure, we were still short on proper armor. But hey, one step at a time. Once the blades were all handed out, Norrell gave the guys a quick pep talk. He'd sworn the Baron would hook them up with gear, and he totally came through. He wanted me to give a speech as well, but I passed on the offer. Up next was unloading the remaining 100 swords. A standard blade usually runs under 5 gold pieces, but these babies were special. I was aiming for at least 30 gold apiece. If I managed to sell the whole batch, that'd net us a cool 3,000 gold coins. I steered completely clear of the federal lands. If that old Baron caught wind of my premium armaments, he'd definitely try to scheme his way in. Instead, I headed straight for the capital. Big Land couldn't manufacture armor just yet, so picking up some suits in the city was a must. This trek had to happen. Even though I just returned from there a bit ago, Ella sat this particular journey out. The poor thing came down with a bug, thanks to the brutal temperature shifts between daytime and night, leaving her too bedridden to even wave goodbye. Nora volunteered to ride along as bodyguard, but I told him to stay put. The trail to the capital was safe enough on its own. A pair of soldiers was all I required. The real danger was back in the Lukka territory itself. If bandits raided the place while I was away, someone had to be on site to command the guards. The journey went smoothly enough without Alalu, even if I felt kind of out of it. It took me forever just to fix my own clothes, and at one point I instinctively reached out for the cup of tea she always had waiting. Then it hit me that she stayed behind. I chuckled at my own expense and shook it off. Wild how quickly you get used to someone. As the roads broadened, we made it to the capital. My headspace was completely different from my last visit. I made a straight line for the Far East Trading Company, easily one of the biggest firms in the capital. They don't just do business within Norrance, but across the kingdoms of Yade and Rima, too. It was established by the renowned Duke Simon, a highly aggressive political figure in Norrance, who strongly advocates for conquest and expansion. You would think a warmonger type wouldn't manage a merchant guild, but it turns out peddling goods and conquering populations aren't mutually exclusive. The enterprise had a rock-solid reputation, so this was where I planned to unload my blades. In a world where warfare could break out at any second, weapons are always in high demand. My baronial crest secured me a parking spot easily enough. I laid a single sword down on the guildmaster's desk. "Is this what you're looking to sell, esteemed Baron Lukka?" I nodded, taking a sip of the tea he had provided. "If the price is right, we could work out a long-term arrangement." He drew the blade from its leather sheath, with just one hand. I hadn't checked his stats, but judging solely by that motion, I could tell his martial strength was at least 40. He checked it out in the sunlight. "Not a bad piece," he remarked, "but it's got no magical properties. You get what I'm saying?" I caught his drift immediately. Tons of aristocrats show up with some random heirloom blade, insisting it's enchanted just to swindle some extra cash. Barons, counts, he'd seen them all. I chuckled and said, "As you can tell, it's just a well-crafted, standard weapon." He respected the straightforwardness. "I can give you 30 Norrance gold pieces for it." That was right around my target price. "Can you do better?" "I've got plenty more available." He paused to think. "If you can bring me 100, I'll go 40 gold apiece." 40 times 100 is 4,000 gold pieces, even after outfitting my own troops. With that initial batch of swords, I was still walking away with over 3,000 gold coins. In pure profit. "Deal. Great doing business with you, esteemed Baron." I tossed 3 silver coins to Oxiu and the 2 guards accompanying me. telling them to go have some fun in the capital. They bolted straight for the pubs and gambling dens, while Oxyu stuck around to pitch in. The 4,000 gold pieces completely filled 4 crates, which had to be kept at the Far East Trading Company until my departure. Next, I went looking for armor. Buying 100 iron chainmail suits and a few dozen shields set me back roughly 1,000 gold coins. For a second, I considered assembling a cavalry squad, but a single decent mount runs around 300 gold. I could only afford 10, so I scrapped that plan real quick. Before traveling back, I picked up some presents. A pink ribbon for Yahello, and some different colored ones for Aquina and Saruka. They hadn't been in my service very long, spending most of their days learning standard maid chores. But if I wanted to truly earn their devotion, I couldn't just pick favorites. So I dropped by a magic bookstore. Sorcery was still a pretty bizarre, far-off idea to me. Honestly, I'd never encountered a real wizard during my whole time on this continent. Word on the street was only viscounts or higher ranks could afford to employ them. But Saruka actually had a gift for magical affinity, meaning she was a born spellcaster. All I needed was to get her loyalty high enough, and then pour resources into her training. I picked up 3 books: Intro to Magic for 130 gold pieces, Practical Magical Properties for another 300 gold, and Romantic Tales of Mages for 100 gold. The first pair were meant for Saruka's schooling. After that last one, well, everyone needs some fun reading, right? The shopkeeper even tossed in a pair of practice wands. Seeing how much cash I was dropping, by the time I stepped outside, 2 crimson moons were already hanging in the evening sky. I was so ready to head back, I seriously missed Yahello's tea. When I got back, Yahello was already there waiting. She practically flew at me the second I climbed down from the carriage. Clinging to me tightly, she only stepped back when she caught the strange looks from the bystanders nearby. She had been totally miserable the entire week I was away. I gave her nose a playful flick and pulled out the pink ribbon. She clutched it, as if it were the most priceless gem in existence, her gaze turning incredibly soft and warm. Aquina and Saruka stood close by in their maid uniforms, looking pretty timid and unsure of themselves. When I passed them their ribbons as well, they were completely dumbfounded. They definitely hadn't expected a thing. I checked out their stats while they were in high spirits. Their devotion had climbed up quite nicely. Aquina hit 60, while Saruka reached 80. Fair enough, it was high time to take off those slave collars. Once dinner was done, I wiped my face and announced, "Hey, listen up." The maids, including Norl, went dead silent. Starting tomorrow, no more slave collars. Those things are a total drag, right? And look, if anyone wants out, just say the word. I'll give you some traveling cash. Isla looked like she was about to argue, but she bit her tongue when she realized I wasn't kidding around. I set the ownership contracts right before Saruka and Aquina. Ripping these apart would disable their restraints. They'd be free. Both of them just stared at me, totally stunned. Saruka broke the silence, speaking softly but directly. "Master." Saruka has no desire to leave. She slid the parchment right back to my side. Aquina hesitated for a second, but whatever doubts she had, she followed suit. I grinned, took both documents, and tore them to shreds. Bits of paper scattered all over the floor. "Seriously, I'm not playing. You're free to go whenever. You don't even need a reason. All that matters is knowing you are independent now. Period. No strings attached. No hidden logic to it. I bought them, and now I'm letting them go." Once the chain mail got passed around, and my guards got completely geared up, they finally passed for a legitimate army. Before this, if you told me they were just some local village militia, I would have bought it. The gear I handed them was something most barons couldn't even dream of funding. Even Phaedrus's entire light cavalry unit only had basic leather armor and pretty lousy weapons. Heavy iron gear is usually reserved for viscounts, personal troops at the very least. My 100 soldiers could hold their own against almost anything, except for actual wizards, heavy cavalry, or griffin riders. Norl grabbed the troops and wipe out the local bandits. He struck his fist against his chest. "I won't let you down, my lord." The outlaws terrorizing the Laika region went by the name Blood Pigs, roughly 200 strong. Their boss had plagued my security forces for years. Even my old man couldn't get rid of them. They knew the land and hid out in the peaks. Didn't matter though. Sure, they had us outnumbered 2-1, but their gear was pure trash next to ours. Our shields and armor shrugged off their arrows. Norl's brutal training routine had worked the boys hard. It finally paid off. Our heavy broadswords hacked straight through their weapons, like they were twigs. The final tally, 0 casualties on our end, just 3 wounded, and total destruction for the Blood Pigs. We seized a mountain of gear, and to my absolute delight, more than a dozen solid horses. The thieves had been plundering trade caravans and hoarding the loot. A few bit the dust, howling that the royal knights had ambushed them. Honestly, with how my men fought, I can't blame them for making that mistake. I handed over the captured junk weapons to Big Land to scrap for parts. Those mounts were the true jackpot. Now I could actually begin forming a cavalry squad. The catch was, not a single person on my payroll knew how to tame these wild northern steeds, except my veteran coachman. But he was far too old and frail to break them in. He had been serving the Luica household since Granddad's time. I just have to track down a skilled stable hand later. Right then, Aquina stepped up and threw her hat in the ring. She possessed the beast-taming gift, and creatures naturally loved her. Breaking these horses would be a breeze for her. As it happened, once I took off her collar, Aquina had spent days checking if she was actually a free agent. Early one day, she hiked straight to the border of the Luca lands and just hung out there until nightfall. When she strolled back, the only thing anyone asked was where she'd gone off to. No one pursued her. No one kept tabs on her. She was totally free, and that left her completely adrift. There was no home left for her to go back to. Even if she made her way back through Rima to get to her clan's territory, her folks were gone, and everything was wiped out. I had provided her with shelter, food, and tranquility. That vengeful spark in her eyes was gradually fading away. Sticking around here wasn't such a bad gig after all. As for Saruka, I summoned her to my workspace one afternoon. The final rays of dusk were streaming through the glass when she softly nudged the door open. "Master, did you need to see me? I've been reading, well, I got a little too wrapped up in some trashy mage romance novels and had a snap out of it." I casually tossed it aside. "Saruka, take a seat. Do you have any interest in magic?" Her loyalty stat had spiked up to 85. I reached toward the bookcase to pass her a volume, but mistakenly grabbed Romantic Tales of Mages instead. Her face flushed bright red right away. She clearly read way too much into what I was hinting at. Catching my blunder, I felt my own cheeks burn up and quickly swapped it for Introduction to Magic. "My bad, it's this one." I swear I wasn't pulling anything funny here. Once she cooled down, I explained, "I genuinely think you have a knack for sorcery. If you could develop into a potent mage, it would be a massive asset to the Luca territory. Seeing that you decided to stick around, I hope you'll do your part." She gave a nod and grabbed the volume, looking pretty unsure of herself. "But my lord, I'm not even sure if I've got a knack for magic." "I've got faith in you," I replied. "Just give it your all, and if it doesn't pan out, no big deal either. The Luca fiefdom will always welcome you." With my backing, Saruka dived headfirst into her magical studies. I let her off the hook for chores so she could focus. In the meantime, I bought another 2,000 gold pieces worth of iron, or to keep Big Lon occupied. I even brought on 2 locals to assist at the smithy. 1 month down the line, Big Lon turned out 500 blades at the previous rate. That was 25,000 gold coins just waiting to roll in. Just to give you an idea, the monthly tax revenue for the Luca region amounted to barely 10 gold. Amassing 25,000 would take generations of tax collecting. Even the federal folks would covet a haul like that. Staring at that row of gleaming new blades, I didn't see weapons. I saw absolute piles of cash. I handed Big Lon his cut, and he hit the pub right away to celebrate, buying rounds for his couple of helpers. Honestly, as long as that dwarf has meat and beer, he's set. Things were looking brighter on the safety front, too, since Norrell had cleared out the blood swine. The area had turned totally quiet. Diggers and trackers who ran from the outlaw tax began making their way back to Luca territory. Over at the Far East Trading Association Guild, Master Weiss welcomed me with a massive grin. He let me know that the weapons from my prior delivery were a smash hit. The aristocrats who bought them just couldn't stop raving about the quality. He picked them up at 50 gold pieces and flipped them for 70. Yet demand was still vastly outstripping supply. If I brought in another shipment to sell, could you move it? I inquired. His face totally lit up. "No matter how much you've got, Baron, the Far East Trading Company will take the whole lot." Once another seamless deal was wrapped up, Weiss threw in some incredibly lavish bonuses. A thoroughbred northern steed worth easily 1,000 gold, plus a complete set of decorated armor and a premium noble blade. That's roughly 5,000 gold in total perks. I accepted the gifts with style and assured him that our alliance would definitely continue. Later, while sharing a few drinks, Weiss leaned right in. "Since we've hit it off so well, let me give you a little inside scoop." He had stopped addressing me as Baron Luica, switching to just Lin Wei, a clear sign of real familiarity. "The third autumn offensive kicks off in roughly 2 months. If you intend to enlist, why not enlist under Count Einstein's banner? Given our close bond, I could secure you a spot as a centurion, at least. The autumn campaign is a traditional Old Norse custom. essentially plundering the wealthier frontier lands of Rima and Yade. I'd never possessed the military muscle to participate before. I could scarcely manage simple outlaws. But nowadays, my guard were heavily armed and combat-tested. I was definitely intrigued. Count Einstein was Duke Simon's son-in-law, making him a heavyweight player within the left-wing coalition. The kingdom's political landscape was fractured, right down the middle between hawks and doves, and majority of lords had already chosen a side. I stood out as one of the few neutrals, mainly because I'd been far too helpless and broke for anyone to bother recruiting me anyway. A centurion post felt pretty underwhelming, and honestly it was. Any baron joining a count's ranks gets that much. Now, if they had offered me a regiment of 1,000, I might have actually considered it. Sure, I took Weiss's gifts today, but that didn't mean I was ready to chain myself to Duke Simon's faction just like that. Then again, shutting Weiss down openly would completely tank a lucrative business connection. So, I put on a wasted act. Wait, did you say there are elf girls around here? I slurred, looking around like an idiot, because I don't see any. Weiss had been keeping his voice down, and we both had a ton of beer in us. So acting like it missed me was easy enough. He slapped his knee and burst out laughing. You're totally wasted, Baron Luca. We don't provide that sort of thing here. But hey, if you're keen, I'll keep my eyes open for elf slaves. Smart guy. He didn't push the politics any further. As long as I wasn't siding with the opposition, trading with a neutral party suited him just fine. He was slightly bummed out for sure, but I was merely a minor baron. He himself was just a landless baron, serving Count Einstein, who answered to Duke Simon. The chain of command stretched way above him. Then it's a deal, I said, referring to the elf business, and stood up to head out. Weiss made a show of getting up to escort me, but then slumped right back onto his stool. No need to see me out, Guild Master Weiss. Fair enough then, Baron Luke. Can't wait for our next transaction. He had reverted to the formal title of Baron Luca. We both tacitly understood that. The political talk was officially over. Once I split, I bet Weiss completely quit pretending to be wasted. His gaze probably sharpened up instantly, the very second I headed out. Once inside the coach, the booze hit me like a truck. The rocking motion made my stomach flip, and I ended up losing my lunch. The maids had a hell of a time cleaning the coach. Looking back, I'm glad Eliuta didn't catch me. Getting double-teamed by her fretting and lecturing would have been too much. I've been living in this world for ages now. Every single blood relative of mine is gone. My old man had some brothers, but they ran off to be knights somewhere. After getting cut out of the inheritance, they probably bit the dust in battle. I never once heard of another Luca actually making something of themselves. Yahello is pretty much the only family I've left. Aquina had been doing great, breaking in the horses. That urge to escape had completely vanished from her eyes. Saruka was always the compliant sort, pouring all her energy into mastering magic. I trusted her potential because of her stats, but she was clueless about that. She was terrified of letting me down, so she ground away day and night without a break. Then one day, she stepped into my study. Master, I finished both volumes. She set them down on my desk. 400 gold coins worth of reference books, wrapped up in under a week. I knew she had skills, but this blew my expectations right out of the water. I pulled up her profile. Saruka Martial, Strategy, 5. Rating, 1.08. Loyalty. Score, 87. Talents, Magical Affinity. Wisdom's Blessing. Experienced Novice Mage. Her strategy stat had shot up by 9 points. Plus, she unlocked a brand new skill. A novice mage making serious strides. But major progress also meant hefty bills ahead. The bookstore in the capital city only carries basic, beginner-level stuff. Anything past that requires signing up at the Royal Magic Academy. Intermediate courses run at least 5,000 gold, and advanced levels cost 20,000 minimum. Most gifted commoners just teach themselves the basics, then make coin through adventurer guilds, or serve as court mages to fund further studies. I just raked in a tidy sum, but plotting out those upcoming expenses still gave me serious anxiety. Even so, I wasn't about to skimp on my own catgirl mage. In a few days, you're heading to the capital's Magic Academy. I informed her, I'm granting you the rank of appointed knight, under the Luca territory. Every single academy bill you rack up will be on my tab. That knightly title was a big deal. The academy is packed with highborn aristocrats, who would easily pick on a defenseless catgirl commoner. With my family name backing her up, though, combined with the school's policy of treating all races equally, provided the tuition is cleared, she'd at least have some peace of mind. Saruka went stiff, her gray tail swishing anxiously, while her tiny ears twitched. I just dropped the news that she wasn't a slave anymore, that she was officially a knight, and that I was bankrolling her entire schooling. It was totally overwhelming for her. Master, her eyes began to well up. She was an orphan raised by her village elder, and after the old man passed away, she'd scraped by alone foraging for wild greens. Then, Rima's troops captured her, forcing her into slavery. She'd figured her life was over. But I gave her everything, including her dignity. Protection, a real tomorrow. No one had shown her this much kindness since. The former chief. Is everything okay? I asked, totally out of the loop. Was she missing home? I checked her stats. Her loyalty jumped from 87 straight to a maxed out 100. Just like that. With devotion like that. Every single coin I spent on her was totally worth it. Suddenly, she lunged straight into my arms. Her tiny frame was shivering against me. For a girl so scrawny, she had a seriously tight grip. Honestly, I couldn't even breathe for a second. Master, Saruka will never let you down. Her pale blue eyes stared up at me, completely reflecting my own face. It was like she was memorizing my looks, etching the image deep into her soul. I had given her a fresh start, and she was ready to give me the rest of her days. Later that evening, beams of moonlight flooded my room. I was hitting the books, when faint footsteps echoed out in the corridor. Then came a soft tap. Master, are you asleep yet? Saruka stood right by the door, clutching a white pillow, looking at me full of hope. For a split second, my mind totally drifted to the gutter, but I quickly snapped out of it. I can't drift off, she whispered. Can I stay here tonight? My bed was massive. You could easily fit 5 of her on it. She was probably just stressed about heading to the academy. Simple as that. So, I welcomed her in. We shared the same mattress. And soon enough, my breaths leveled out as I dozed off. I had no clue back then, but Saruka actually stayed up for a while longer, gazing at my face under the moonlit sky. She looked back on all the misery she'd survived, the endless struggles, the bondage, and the starvation. So, she figured it was just a trial from above, since it ultimately led her straight to me. If the gods are actually real, she muttered to herself, please protect my master for the rest of the time. Aquina wasn't exactly crazy about Saruka, or at least, that's what she kept telling herself. But when the moment arrived, for Saruka to head off to the Magic Academy, over in the capital, envy wasn't the first thing Aquina felt. It was pure sorrow. She knew she had zero knack for magic. Saruka had allowed her to check out the texts, but after just a couple of pages, she'd nearly dozed off. That settled it for Aquina. I'm heading out now, Saruka mentioned softly. She'd always been aware that Aquina disliked her. Yet she also remembered how things really went. Way back in the village, whenever the local kids picked on the quiet new girl, Aquina was the one who defended her. And when the old village chief passed away, and Saruka wept all by herself, Aquina had been watching over her, hidden behind a tree. Saruka never forgot a single detail. Aquina stayed silent, so Saruka merely offered a smile, waved, and walked over to me, because Yahello was right there. Saruka maintained her distance. She was still feeling pretty guilty about creeping into my bed the previous night. Thinking back on it now, she just felt totally embarrassed, mixed with a bit of respect for her own sheer nerve. Poor Yahello didn't have a clue that she'd already been totally outplayed. She simply squeezed Saruka's hand softly and said, stay safe out there in the capital. Saruka's heart was racing. She honestly felt like some sort of sneaky little cat. I just gave Saruka an encouraging nod. With her loyalty maxed out at 100, she was definitely worth every bit of the effort. Once the coach vanished down the road, Aquina finally came to her senses and yelled out to her, have a safe trip. I'll be waiting right here for your return. The final burst of summer heat melted away with the earliest autumn wind, and the fall campaign was drawing near. I ended up getting an official summons from the kingdom of Norrance, which totally caught me off guard. I figured they only remembered I was alive, because I'd sold that gladiator's crest insignia to the royals. Otherwise, I highly doubt King Luke XIII would give a second thought to some nobody. Border Baron. Still, I was absolutely going. This campaign was my best shot at racking up military achievements, and accolades were the sole way to secure a grander title. The higher my standing, the more clout I'd carry within the realm, and the better I could safeguard everything I hold dear. As for scoring new lands from a rank upgrade, that just wasn't in the cards. Every single plot of land in Norrance was already claimed. Fresh territory would only come from a massive war that forced Rima or Yade to cede their borders, and that wasn't bound to happen anytime soon. I split up what was left of my cash. 5,000 gold went straight to Saruka's schooling. Out of the remaining 20,000, I dropped 10,000 on raw iron ore. Look at territory was packed with mineral deposits, plenty to keep us going for 100 years. The capital I pumped into the local economy. Got the townsfolk seriously hyped about mining. Even standard hunters were switching gigs to become miners. A bigger workforce brought in more traders. And more traders meant an increase in tax revenue. It was a solid cycle. The region had always been dirt poor, simply because we had no viable outlet for all the minerals we could extract. Plus, the soil was way too barren for farming. So, Bigland's Forge gave you guys a reason to be here. I dropped 5,000 to patch up the decaying walls, drill some wells, and pave proper roads. The remaining 5,000 went as signing up 200 rugged locals for Norrell to whip into shape, right alongside our current watch. Bigland was in charge of their gear. For a massive push like the Autumn Campaign, you don't typically witness heavy cavalry blitzes or wizard showdowns. Those ace cards are saved strictly for full-blown warfare. My foot soldiers would easily get the job done. One morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Blonde hair, brown eyes, long eyelashes, honestly quite easy on the eyes. A slender frame with a bit of toned muscle. Though my actual fighting skills were pretty much zilch. I really amounted to nothing but a pretty aristocrat with zero combat prowess. Alila was helping me pick out an outfit, since I was planning to head down to the drilling grounds to see how the troops were coming along. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. It was the old butler's voice. "My lord, someone is here to see you." "Who?" "The butler, representing the Fedra domain. Baron Fedra requests your presence for supper tonight." Fedra. That smug, grinning face flashed vividly in my mind. So that old traitor had caught wind of Luca Domain's booming progress. In a matter of mere months, we had practically overtaken his own lands. Some wandering merchant must have delivered the gossip straight to him. And now, the guy who had locked me out in the cold was crawling back. "No." My tone was chilling and deadpan. "Understood, my lord." The butler answered before taking his leave. Yahello finished straightening up my white shirt. I looked pretty sharp. I carried a sort of royal vibe about me that I'd never quite felt before. "Move out, Yahello. We're checking out the training grounds." The training field looked massive. Norrell had made it bigger to accommodate our growing army. Watching them run through their sword drills, I couldn't help but nod approval. Man, what a total turnaround from those pathetic wimps I took charge of at the start. You could clearly spot two different groups. The first batch, those original 100 guys, boasted combat stats sitting right around 40. Real seasoned veterans now, they were sparring with live steel. They took hits and went full contact, sure, but better to bleed here than get slaughtered in a real war. Then you had Group 2, the 200 new rookies, whose stats still hovered in the 20s and 30s. They were practicing basic blade forms under Norrell's sharp eye. With barely 2 months left before the Autumn Campaign, my game plan was to deploy 50 heavy cavalry units. Most of the mounts were seized from the Blood Pig, outlaws, and left in Aquinas' custody. Those already top-tier northern warhorses had grown seriously jacked and full of spirit. Bigland hammered out full suits of horse barding. Using schematics I'd picked up at the market, the silver armor gleamed, but it weighed so much that a burly soldier could scarcely haul a single set. But once strapped onto those massive stallions, they turned into absolute juggernauts. Even so, I wasn't flaunting the armored horses right away. Throughout the march, I'd have the supply team cart the gear in crates. Alongside the pack mules, heavy cavalry packs a punch, but they're slow. Since this wasn't a siege, the extra protection was just a safety net. More than anything, I wanted to fly under the radar. A mere baron who can bankroll heavy cavalry is bound to make plenty of aristocrats nosy. Until I grew powerful enough, I had to keep a low profile. Meanwhile, over at the capital's Magic Academy, Saruka was absolutely crushing it, though I didn't catch the full story until later. Her mentor called her up front to show off. A fireball spell, readying her training wand, she recited the incantation, and a burst of fire tore right through a giant rock. The entire classroom burst into applause. Her professor was blown away. In barely a month, Saruka had locked down every mid-tier spell, showing off some seriously crazy talent. In another 2 months, she'd lock in her intermediate mage license. She might even try becoming the youngest person to ever pass the advanced mage trials. The instructor was well aware that if Saruka hit that advanced rank, every noble family would be fighting to sign her. Some low-ranking baron's estate definitely couldn't afford those steep fees. Influential dynasties would definitely approach Saruka. Behind closed doors, it was going to be the ultimate test of her devotion. But what that teacher failed to realize was that Saruka was literally counting down the days until she could head back home. She remembered every single cent I'd invested in her. Even if I couldn't cover the elite schooling, she'd hustle up the cash herself, long before she'd ever dream of turning her back on me. To fill her free time, Saruka had taken on a side gig tutoring. A countess hired her to teach sorcery to her little girl, paying a cool 100 gold coins a class. Saruka was super grateful for the opportunity. Then one night, Just as Saruka reached the Count's manor for her class, Count Pharaohs intercepted her in the corridor. Standing right beside him was a stocky, middle-aged guy. After introducing everyone, Count Pharaohs himself cut straight to the chase. Saruka, I want you on the Pharaohs family team. Whatever your current deal pays you, I'll match it twice over. Your advanced mage schooling, a proper magical staff once you graduate, plus rare grimoires. The Pharaohs clan will cover the whole lot. Saruka hesitated for a split second, then gave a polite bow. Thank you for the offer, Count Pharaohs, but I'm already a sworn knight of the Luca domain. I don't plan on switching to another house. The Count was caught off guard, but he wasn't mad. Honestly, her turning him down actually impressed him. Someone who'd bail the moment a better offer drops isn't worth hiring anyway. The mere fact that she said no proved she was exactly the kind of powerhouse worth chasing. He chuckled. Well, if you ever have a change of heart, my door's always open. He felt pretty confident. He was one of Duke Simon's heavyweight lords, a major player in this kingdom, next to some nameless broke baron out on the frontier. He figured the little cat girl would eventually realize which side her bread was buttered on. With barely a month left before the autumn drive, Nora's brutal training regime had finally whipped all 300 guards into proper soldiers. Their combat stats had all cleared 40, with a few even hitting 50. Squad grade shot straight from E up to C, bypassing D completely. I selected the top 50, the absolute strongest, and informed them they were getting combat mounts. Their reactions were honestly priceless. Just securing iron armor and decent blades was way beyond anything they had ever anticipated, let alone actual war horses. They were immediately separated for cavalry drills. They had to ride properly before the upcoming march. Otherwise, my grand vision of a heavy cavalry sweep would remain just a pipe dream. Nor was the most hyped. He already knew about the mounts, but didn't expect me to deploy them so quickly. He selected the most powerful stallion and dove straight into practice right with the troops. Aquina watched the beasts being guided away one by one, looking slightly downcast. She'd really bonded with them over those weeks of breaking them in. Only that thoroughbred guild master Wise gifted me remained behind in the stalls. Master, please tell them to take it easy during drills. She muttered softly, her tail swishing back and forth. To be honest, I really wanted to reach out and stroke her ears. But Aquina wasn't the sweet, cuddly type like Saruka. I'd probably just get bitten. So I checked myself. As I turned around to head out, she suddenly called out, Master, has there been any word from Saruka? I shook my head. No actual correspondence from Saruka herself. Just tuition invoices from the academy, along with a memo, commending her for achieving her intermediate mage credentials. I didn't quite grasp the details of what that implied, but it definitely sounded top tier. Aquina's expression darkened for a second, but then she braced herself, her face flushing a bright crimson. Would it be okay if I sent a letter to Saruka? I beamed. Of course. Just hand it to the old butler, and he'll dispatch it for you. Thank you, master. She dashed off, totally mortified. Well, that was new. I'd honestly never seen Aquina act so bashful before. Meanwhile, matters at the Magic Academy took a twist. I completely failed to foresee. Saruka's mentor decided on a whim to introduce her to high-tier spellcraft. Saruka totally nailed it in just one afternoon, barely 3 months into her studies, and she was already throwing down advanced magic. Her instructor had taught there for over 3 decades, and had literally never witnessed such raw talent. Saruka's understanding of magical theory was already way past the upper tiers, and now her hands-on skills were matching up. Throughout her enrollment at the school, various nobles kept trying to recruit her with perks, massive salaries, fully covered tuition, and scarce grimoires. Yet she snubbed them all. She stayed fiercely loyal to me, her obscure, low-rank baron, leaving everyone else completely baffled. Her teacher went straight to the headmaster to pitch a scholarship for her absolute star pupil. She returned almost right away. Saruka, the dean requested your presence. As they walked, the instructor filled her in. The reigning dean was Alia, the continent's 13th-ranked Grand Magus, an honorary Duchess of Norrance, and an elf blessed with immense longevity. She'd held the post since the academy opened. Myriads of elite sorcerers had trained under her guidance, not only serving Norrance, but also securing major roles in Rima and Yade. Saruka swung open the massive, time-worn door, and found herself face-to-face with a stunningly gorgeous, white-haired elf. Crimson, unemotional eyes inspected her closely, contrasting with her sophisticated gray wizard vestments. There was no hiding her stunning silhouette. Step closer, Elia commanded. Saruka did as told. The dean gave her a long, intense scrutiny. Immense potential, she remarked at last. Then, out of the blue, do you know my identity? You are Dean Elia, she smiled. A subtle, chilly smirk. That, somehow, made the blossoms outside the window seem completely washed out. Next to her, Saruka, I want to mentor you as my private pupil. What do you say? The offer hit Saruka like a ton of bricks. She just stood there, completely paralyzed for a few moments before slowly nodding. Master Alia, she gave a deep bow. Even a girl as naive as Saruka grasped the weight of this opportunity. Becoming the chosen apprentice of an iconic Grand Magus changed the entire game. Nobody could push her around or try to strong-arm her with underhanded tricks anymore. She was free to nurture her gifts, backed by the ultimate level of protection. Word that Saruka was now Dean, Alia's personal apprentice, tore through the whole capital like wildfire. It even caught the attention of the king. I only pieced the whole thing together later, but it was way bigger than I ever guessed. Alia wasn't just some school principal. She served as a literal cornerstone of the realm, an honorary duchess, directly titled by Norin's founding sovereign. She wasn't even required to bow before King Xylic XIII. She had been managing the academy for centuries, thanks to an elf's incredibly vast lifespan. And throughout that entire span, she had only ever taken on 2 private students. Saruka was the first human who turned into an iconic Grand Magus, fended off 3 Grand Magi simultaneously, and even took down a dragon all by himself. He was once viewed as the most powerful mage across the land. The second instance was an elf, who is now ruling the White Elf clan over in the southern continent, sitting at number 5 among all Grand Magi. Both were absolute icons, and Saruka made history as the third. So, naturally, the entire kingdom completely flipped out. Party invites and scouting offers came pouring in from every corner. But Saruka finally had the confidence to chuck every single letter straight into the trash. Before becoming Alia's student, she'd never have dared, but now she had serious backing. Elia asked around about Saruka's past, and once she discovered, my little mage used to be a low-ranking knight from some literal nobody baron's land. She just gave Saruka a pat on the head and ordered her to keep her origins a total secret. Anyone who was already in the loop would stay quiet. Elia knew that if the public caught wind that a random baron was backing this prodigy, it would just paint a massive target on Luca territory, rather than helping it. Saruka needed to build up her own real power before that connection could ever be made public. Elia was strictly independent when it came to the kingdom's politics. She wasn't going to openly defend my land, not even for Saruka's sake, doing that would ruin centuries of neutrality and make her a prime target for both rival sides. She honestly just didn't want the drama. Count Pharaohs, the guy who had tried scouting Saruka, got a letter stamped with Alia's private crest. From what I could tell, the poor fellow just about had a heart attack. The note was courteous, but the point was obvious. Don't say a word about where Saruka came from. Pharaoh deeply kicked himself for not claiming Saruka while he had the chance. And he definitely wasn't about to cross a Grand Magus. Still, his business-oriented mind began to race. Why on earth would Alia take a personal interest in a nobody from the Luca region? Could the Baron secretly be tied to her? Perhaps even her secret son? He couldn't help but let his mind wander. Either way, he chose to quietly snoop around my domain, and maybe play nice to build some goodwill, just in case. Meanwhile, Saruka got Aquina's note and was absolutely thrilled. She had been so buried in her coursework that sending a letter home completely slipped her mind. She was joyfully drafting a reply when Alia cornered her. Writing to your precious Baron. Alia smirked. No, master. It's just my friend Aquina. Alia's features softened, but her next words gave Saruka serious pause. Until you become a true magus, it's safer if you don't send replies. Saruka was thoroughly confused. You must be powerful enough to stand proudly by his side. Being an advanced mage won't cut it. You have to make magus status. Only then will anyone plotting against the Luca territory hesitate. But I really miss them, Saruka muttered under her breath. Alia gave a soft smile. Once you hit advanced mage rank, I'll grant you a week's leave to visit home. Saruka's face instantly brightened, returning to my side. That was the exact fire she needed to push herself to the absolute limit. Charge! My horsemen stormed across the training grounds, spears gripped tight, kicking up clouds of dust. They'd been practicing around the clock for a month with their new gear, and I'd seriously upgraded their rations, from watery gruel to solid wheat cakes, to keep their stamina up. It totally paid off. They were training like their lives depended on it. Surveying my 300 troops, I felt pretty damn satisfied. As long as we don't clash with specialized squads, or Rima's elite royal guard. We'll crush it in the autumn campaign. We have under a week left before we need to make it to Furnace Bridge Fortress and check in with the main army. I still hadn't heard a single word back from Saruka, though the Magic Academy had been sending me updates. Turns out she's doing amazing already, studying directly under the dean himself. Even stuck out here in the boonies, I knew exactly how big of a deal that was. It didn't take me long to connect the dots on her silence. The Luca domain is way too vulnerable, and she's drawing way too many eyes right now. The dean was actually looking out for me by keeping our ties completely under wraps. I was super grateful and, honestly, kind of blown away. Lucky break that I maxed out Saruka's loyalty stats before she split. If I hadn't, all those flashy offers from high and mighty nobles might have actually poached her away from me. Who would have guessed that quiet, timid little cat girl would turn out to be such a prodigy? Well, I did. But hey, I'm using cheat codes. I clued Aquina in on Saruka's situation. She was pretty bummed at first about the radio silence. But once I broke down reality for her, she completely cheered up. She's really starting to embrace life in the Luca territory. More and more each day. That thirst for vengeance finally seemed to be dying down. Right before we rolled out, I gave him in a quick speech. 300 pumped-up guards stared back at me, eyes blazing. I tapped into some old knowledge from Earth to whip up a pretty solid pep talk. Even Norrell looked genuinely impressed. He definitely didn't expect me to be that smooth of a talker. On top of my 300 elite troops, I drafted around 800 militia. In farmhands just to haul our gear. Just before we moved, Ayla fixed my gear, her eyes completely bloodshot. Please try not to cry, young master. You gotta make it back in one piece. I grinned and gave her a hug. I'll be back. Just don't go jinxing me. She looked totally blank at the weird phrase, so I just gave her shoulder a reassuring pat and mounted up. It was the thoroughbred Guild Master Wise had gifted me. I commanded the column forward, sending a pair of light cavalry scouts ahead to recon. Furnace Bridge Fortress was already packed to the brim with noble flags. By the time we showed up, this served as the final outpost before Rima's frontier, typically holding a garrison of 5,000 troops. Past the stretch of no man's land up ahead, you could catch a glimpse of Rima's rich fields. Way out in the distance, I stepped up to the intake officer. 300 elites, plus a 500-man supply train, all top tier. He gave me a doubtful look, a mere baron with 300 elites? But then his eyes drifted past me to inspect my men. Polished iron armor, high-grade weaponry, tight discipline. Perfect formation, even a few dozen cavalrymen mounted on massive northern chargers, completely decked out in heavy barding. Giving a slow nod, he had to admit they were top tier. He openly acknowledged that most Viscounts couldn't even mobilize a force this impressive. If I were a count, it would have made a whole lot more sense. We marched right into the fort. My battalion was formidable, yet surrounded by the gathered high society. Our head count only put us right in the middle. A lot of folks threw looks our way, then froze for a second glance. The moment they spotted my Baron's emblem, Viscounts and Counts, who were actually planning to come say hi, instantly reconsidered. A top-tier unit like this belonging to just a Baron? It totally threw them off. And then there was Baron Fedra. I caught him staring at my troops, with the most bizarre look on his face. Word had reached him that Luca territory was thriving, which is exactly why he sent his butler to invite me to dinner. I turned him down naturally, now that he was seeing my heavily armed men and beastly war horses with his own eyes. He was probably kicking himself. He had to be thinking, if this kid had shown what he could do a bit sooner, I never would have slammed the door in his face. He could have been my son-in-law. Then he glanced back at his own light cavalry. Scrawnier mounts, cheap leather armor, and subpar weapons. And the massive difference must have hit him like a truck. His thousands of guards couldn't hold a candle to my 300 when it came to quality, but crying over spilled milk was pointless. He made his bed when he refused to grant me an audience, and things between us had gone south beyond repair. Honestly, the fact that I hadn't called him out on it was already way more courtesy than he earned. Lest we forget, I had literally shown up at his doorstep, and he brushed me off like some random stranger. The evening before our march into Rima, plenty of fellow barons came over to shoot the breeze, plus a couple of minor viscounts. They poked around with the usual banter. Was I single? Did I want a side chick? How on earth did I build such a powerhouse crew? I turned them all down quite politely. My old man hadn't been gone for long, so claiming I wasn't ready to wed was a solid excuse. As for my military secret, I just grinned and steered the conversation away. Besides, even if I told them, they couldn't view stat panels. Anyway, we pulled straws to determine the marching order. I lucked out and made the first wave, right behind the king and the dukes. It was riskier, sure, but the loot would be way better. The guys bringing up the rear wouldn't find a thing left to take. I'm not going to pretend this was some noble crusade. The autumn campaign was pretty much just legalized banditry. Norrance raids Rima's borders every single year. Sometimes in spring, sometimes in autumn, sometimes even winter. They rustle livestock, sack villages, and carry locals off into slavery. Rima and Yade absolutely despise us for it. But neither realm is powerful enough to strike back alone. They need to join forces, but that hasn't happened yet. Rima actually constructed the Furnace Bridge, fortress specifically to hold us off. But Norrance seized the place and flipped it into our very own staging ground. After that, Rima just threw in the towel and tolerated the raids. Once we pushed into Rima's territory, it was honestly kind of dull. A sweeping plain eventually gave way to a massive forest, which was dotted with hamlets and outposts. The king and the dukes snatched up all the low-hanging fruit. Out on the open plains, herds of cattle, groups of shepherds. There was no point competing with them. So I steered straight into the woods, watching the way those nobles operated, pillaging, rounding up civilians. I couldn't shake a single word from my mind, thugs. This was identical to what those bloody pig raiders used to inflict on my own lands. Norrell briefed the men. We engage Rima's soldiers only. Do not touch the civilians. Norrell seemed puzzled since taking captives was custom. They could be put to work as laborers, or sold off to human traffickers for decent cash. Still, a directive was a directive. So he relayed it down. The troops whined a bit, mostly about missing out on the Rima women. But I treated them well enough that no one dared talk back. We struck our first target pretty fast. A watchtower holding 20 Rima soldiers. Hardly armed, my riders trampled them in a matter of minutes. Their gear was absolute garbage. My men didn't even bother scavenging their weapons. We grabbed their valuables and chopped off their heads. To confirm the body count, Rima folk have blue eyes, so there's no faking your body count. We cleared out a few more outposts as we advanced further. Still no signs of villages by midday. Both the troops and mounts were exhausted, so I called for a break. Inside my tent, I stripped off my armor. My shoulders were already flushed and inflamed from hauling it around all morning. I gave a cynical chuckle at myself, unsure whether I was scoffing at my own frail body or this entire rogue campaign. While I was unwinding, Norrell dispatched a pair of scouts to recon the zone. They returned with intel. My lord, there's a small settlement close by. It has stone walls but minimal security and no heavy artillery. Woodland towns weren't anything unusual out here. Rima is renowned for its dense forests, and plenty of communities are nestled right in the thickets. Let's go check it out. We trailed the scouts through a thinning patch of woods until a path emerged leading straight to a town. It looked even more destitute than Looka lands used to be. The main gates stood wide open, with just a handful of sentries pacing the ramparts lazily. If it weren't for those guards, honestly, I figured it was deserted. Something just seemed off. So I used my skill to size up the guys on the walls. D-Win, Martial, 60 strategy. 40 power, C-tier talents. Perception boost, one-handed sword mastery. Noah, Martial, 64 strategy. 35 power, C-tier talents. Spear mastery. Man, every single sentry had insane stats. They were practically matching Norn's Royal Knights. Way too overpowered for some broken down town, with wide open gates and zero discipline. This whole setup was a trap. Elite troops playing weak, baiting us with an open gate to look like easy pickings. Had I just rushed in, my boys would have ended up as their trophies instead. No way I was biting that bait. What I didn't realize, though, was that Fedra had been tracking me into the woods. As a merchant who bought his baron title, he knew his militia couldn't match the Grand Nobles out on the open plains, so he figured he'd just tail me and scavenge whatever scraps I left behind. But he lost my trail pretty fast in the thick forest. All he stumbled upon were 2 deserted villages and a line of wiped-out outposts. Decapitated Rima's soldiers were scattered around, still wearing their leather armor. He couldn't believe I'd just abandoned the gear. Was I seriously that loaded now? Even the locals had already bolted into the brush, just because I'd marched through. Fedra was absolutely pissed at his lousy luck. Right then, his scouts brought back 2 leads. My campsite and that seemingly defenseless town nearby. Fedra rode out and spotted the exact same scene I did. Gates wide open, the drawbridge completely lowered, and just a couple of dozing guards up on the walls, clad in leather armor. His knight was practically drooling, dying to charge right at the women, the spoils, and the easy war credits. It all seemed way too good, but Fedra knew better. He caught on to the exact same thing I did. Why wasn't I striking with my 300 elites? I could easily steamroll a few dozen guards in leather. The fact that I was just sitting back, watching, meant something was fishy. So he set up camp near mine, ordered a total blackout, and waited. I kept watch for 2 straight days. The town remained creepily quiet. No farmers were out working the fields. No hunters were coming or going from the nearby woods. And 0 civilians were moving about. Just a handful of lazy guards chilling on the walls. When I inspected their stats, every single one had combat attributes in the 60s. Practically Royal Knight tier. An entire town of elite troops, playing off as a weak garrison, leaving the gates wide open. I was absolutely positive now. This was a setup. My men had been choking down cold. Black bread for 2 days without lighting any fires. The only thing keeping us afloat was the abundance of water. Nearby, I decided it was time to fall back. Pushing deeper would put us right by Rima's Gorge Fortress, reputedly the grandest stronghold on the northern continent, with upwards of 20,000 crack troops, heavy artillery, and mages. My 300 wouldn't even count as a light snack to them. I'd been lingering around, partly to see if some idiot would trigger the trap, allowing me to cash in on the chaos. Then, Feder showed up, but that clever old devil was far too cautious to bite, anyway. So much for that strategy. Right when I was packing to leave, the game flipped. A scout came tearing in from beyond the woods, and hit the town center just moments later. Suddenly, the gates burst into pure chaos. Heavy cavalry started flooding out, riders clad in full iron plate armor, marching 5 abreast, thundering straight toward the edge of the woods. I tallied them up, 3,000 heavy horsemen. Right on their heels marched lines of infantry, every man in full iron gear. This was the royal tier elite, the absolute best of the best. Norrell broke out in a cold sweat right next to me. Man, if we had actually raided that town, we would have been totally wiped out. Fader caught sight of it too. From his position, no doubt he was thanking his lucky stars that he hadn't rushed in blindly. Those were Rima's personal royal household forces, and they were clearing out of the woods, pushing toward the open fields after King Ziluk 13. Honestly, only a prize that massive could justify sending out the entire royal guard. And judging by the way flocks of birds were scattering from all sorts of directions. Deep in the wilderness, this wasn't just a single unit. Multiple armies were closing in. This was a massive, set-up ambush aimed squarely at the king. Ziluk had 5,000 guardsmen and 2,000 knights backing him up. But Rama had clearly thrown way more than that into the mix, and there was just no way to tip him off in time. The king didn't bring enough backup. He's in deep trouble, Norrell muttered, and he was spot on. Norrance held the upper hand overall, but Rima had clearly gone completely all in here. Ziluk 13 had treated this whole thing like a minor skirmish, and traveled with a pretty thin escort. Those panicked birds fleeing across the canopy made it clear. Rima was making a massive, definitive play. Norrell was obviously well aware that our 250-foot soldiers and 50 riders stood 0 chance against those royal-class battalions. They were top-tier elites, matching my own guys, and probably packing more raw, physical power. Since Ziluk was backed by dukes and counts, he should have managed a safe retreat, barring any inside betrayal. My thoughts exactly. Norrance never stuck to a set assault schedule. Yet Rima had a trap perfectly set up. Someone definitely leaked our strategy. But we couldn't afford to overthink it then. With Rima's army gone, that settlement was totally unprotected. All right, Commander. This is our moment, Norrell urged, hyped up to ransack the deserted town, before Feder beat us to the punch. Personally, I had bigger fish to fry. How far out is George Fortress? Norrell looked baffled. Under a half-day's march. Are we pushing toward George Fortress, sir? I could tell. His initial reaction was that I'd completely lost it. Then the realization hit him. George Fortress, the grandest stronghold in the northern continent, had to be practically unguarded right now. They had deployed their best troops to ambush Ziluk. Nobody in their right mind would expect a tiny squad to strike directly at their main headquarters, right in the middle of their own raid. It was reckless. We lacked any siege gear, just 300 guys. Yet, the strategy was bulletproof. If that citadel was ever going to be defenseless, it was this very second. Norrell gave the order. All squads ditch everything but mount, armor and spears. Full sprint to George Fortress. Meanwhile, Fedra stormed the empty town instead. He corralled more than 1,000 townsfolk, looted grain and gear, and chalked it up as a massive win. He caught on that I'd vanished, but was way too focused on counting his cash to give a damn. Meanwhile, out on the open plains, things had completely gone sideways for Ziluk. Those spook birds had given him a heads up, but his own cockiness totally blinded him. He'd never dropped a single battle as king, and had 0 respect for Rima. So when a pair of right-wing dukes and their counts suddenly pulled a fast one on him, striking his own troops from the inside, Zillick just froze. His very own aristocracy had stabbed him in the back. The devoted royal guard instantly formed a ring around the king, raising their anti-magic plated steel shields. Thankfully, there weren't any enemy sorcerers close by, and all the chaos rendered the archers totally useless. However, the right-wing factions, boasting a force 30 to 40,000 strong, had gone full traitor. Years of bad blood between the left and right political camps had finally boiled over. "Your Majesty, you got to pull back," yelled the royal knight commander. Zillick snapped out of it. Off in the distance, a massive tidal wave of Rima heavy cavalry was barreling down, easily over 50,000 horsemen, making the very earth shake beneath their onslaught. Not even the royal guard spear walls could hold the line. Against that, the left-wing lords, commanded by Duke Simon, fought tooth and nail to carve out an escape route. Regardless of their political feuds, they weren't turncoats. They knew that taking out Zillick right here wouldn't change a thing. His grown son would just take the throne, and 20,000 royal knights were still stationed back at the capital city. This would only spark an all-out war between the realms. Once Zillick slipped away, Duke Simon and the rest of the left-wing elite made their escape too, leaving their foot soldiers behind. Those deserted guys had no choice but to fight until the very end. Dropping weapons right now just meant getting crushed by heavy cavalry. The most brutal twist was saved for the right wing. Turncoats themselves. They'd been promised a coordinated strike with Rima, a clean inside-outside pincer move. Instead, Rima's cavalry plowed straight through everyone, indiscriminately flattening both rebel and loyalist alike. The traitorous nobles wiped out, without even realizing what hit them. They'd been totally played. Rama never had any intention of sparing them. That forced march to George Fortress really took it out of my men. Sprinting in full iron armor for half a day would have broken most military forces, but for my troops, solid training and proper meals kept them moving. As the stronghold finally came into view, I ordered a halt. George Fortress was way bigger than Furnace Bridge. Huge walls, aristocratic banners everywhere, and an oversized royal standard that really caught my eye. If a member of the Rima royalty was still inside, rather than out hunting down Zillick, this place held some seriously big fish. But my stomach dropped. The gates stood wide open, yet the ramparts were packed with troops, all boasting stats as high as those trap town guards. Formidable, deadly, and backed by rows of loaded ballistas. One wrong step, and we'd be turned into pincushions. I'd risked everything on this gamble. I'd abandoned the head. Trophies we gathered for war credits. I'd bypass that easy town Fedra seized. If I went back empty-handed, the Baron would make me a total laughingstock, having brought top-tier troops to the war, yet coming up empty. Charging the fort was a death wish. Lying low in the woods was just as dicey. A basic patrol could easily spot a few hundred guys. I was right on the verge of calling a retreat, when 5 horsemen suddenly rode out from the fort's gates. Leading the pack was a young guy in golden armor, riding beneath a royal banner of Rima. Some chubby noble was hyping him up, while a lean knight rode alongside them. I quickly scanned the kid's stats. Peter Marshall, strategy, 30, talent, 60, royal aura, royal etiquette, C-rate, loyalty, enro. Total wild card. Never seen that before. His skill set practically shouted royalty, and they were heading straight toward my blind. My heart started racing. If I could bag a prince and make a break for Lukka territory, it'd be the ultimate wartime achievement. Even if Zillick bit the dust out there, dragging back a Rima prince would lock down a viscountcy. Hands down, I gave Norrell a silent hand sign. Ambush them once they pull up. We need them breathing. I breathed. The gold-clad fellow is definitely a Rima prince. Norrell's eyes practically lit up with hype. Snagging a prince meant ultimate bragging rights. For the rest of his days, he gripped his hilt tightly. That plump aristocrat, Count Vane, was spinning tales to the prince about rare forest stags, baiting him to go on a hunt. The slender knight chimed in nervously. "Count Vane, there's a literal war raging. Is it really smart to just ride out in the open?" The count scoffed. "Zillick is completely boxed in. Our scouts are probably bringing word of victory right now. The closest skirmish is half a day's ride away. What are the odds some Norrents much shows up here?" As they entered the woods, a tripwire jerked tight. The front runners ate dirt instantly, and my men finished them off right then and there, with cold steel, before the prince, the count, and that lanky knight could even blink. Their rides tripped over the exact same snare. They took a nasty spill, and we had blades at their throats in a flash. Freeze! The royal guards went down without much of a fight. Sure, they're elite riders, but they never saw an ambush coming, right on their own turf. Norrell sized up our trio of captives. The The prince, that bloated count, and the scrawny knight. Something about the knight felt totally off. Way too petite, way too fragile. Even for a slender guy. Before Norl could grill them, I stepped up to inspect their status panels. I'd already checked out the prince, and the count was nothing to write home about. But the slight knight made me stop dead in my tracks. Name, Unveil. Martial Strategy, 40. Talents, 80. Royal Etiquette. Alchemy Mastery. Rating, A. Unveil. The surname was a perfect match for the princess. This was no knight. It was a princess in man's armor. I went out angling for a prize catch and hooked a double. Bag all 3 of them. We are moving back to headquarters this instant. Right away, my lord. Norl gestured toward the knight. What about this one? Do we? He made a slicing motion across his neck. The princess remained pinned to the ground, her eyes blazing with pure shame and defiance, glaring at me as if she wanted to murder me with a look. All alone, even with death staring her down. She wouldn't show any fear, which made me smirk. Should we execute a prize like this? No way, absolutely no killing. Bind them all up and put this knight on my mount. It's the sturdiest. The prince goes with you guys. Right away, Lord Norl. They roughly tied up the princess and threw her onto my horse. Even Princey and Peter seemed completely dumbfounded. How on earth did this outsider know his royal status? Yet, he didn't dare utter a peep. Behind our backs, George Fortress remained with its gates thrown wide open. A paradise the prince would never set foot in again. The autumn military campaign concluded in a total flop for Norritz. King Zillick XIII was absolutely livid. It was his very first loss in 23 years on the throne, and it happened at the hands of Rima. Tens of thousands of troops were wiped out, and he had nearly lost his own life. The repercussions were savage. The 2 right-wing dukes who turned on him were hunted down along with their entire households, as well as every count who participated in the mutiny. The entire right-wing faction was completely eradicated. In a ruthless liquidation, the left wing, headed by Duke Simon, became the sole authority in court. The crackdown also left a massive amount of real estate up for grabs, confiscated from the executed insubordinates. Still, no one had the guts to request land allocations. While Zillick was still boiling with rage, the left-wing aristocrats demanded an all-out assault against Rima. Zillick was pissed, but he wasn't reckless. He sensed that the 2 dukes' abrupt betrayal was highly suspicious. He wanted vengeance, but he also had to consider the risk of Yade stabbing them in the back. If Norrens deployed everything they had against Rima, after weighing his options, he chose to deploy 10,000 Imperial Guards from the capital, plus the aristocratic forces, totaling roughly 300,000 men. Plenty to teach Rima a serious lesson. Cut to Rima's royal palace, though, where King Ian Charles wasn't partying at all, yeah. Sure, he'd left Norris pretty bloodied, but he knew that giant barely felt a scratch. He never truly expected to take out Zuluk. He just wanted to drop a warning. But then, word came from his men that his second prince and his favorite princess had vanished into thin air. He lost it. How do you lose 2 royals like that? George Fortress was supposed to be completely airtight. Count Vane had dropped off the grid too, right along with the slaughtered escort knights, discovered in the nearby woods. Someone had actually sneaked right into the stronghold and snatched his kids. Even the crown prince kept his mouth shut. Losing royal family members was an absolute embarrassment for the whole dynasty. Charles took a deep breath. His dim-witted son? He could do without him. But his brilliant daughter, a mid-tier mage at just 16? He needed her back, no matter what. The crazy irony was that, fresh off a victory on the battlefield, he now had to deploy diplomats just to talk terms. Meanwhile, as the guy behind all this madness, I was chilling in my tent, checking out my prize. Princess Einved stared daggers at me with her sapphire blue eyes, her gray hair a total mess. She was absolutely livid. Being slung over my horse for the long ride had left her stomach totally cramped up. Oh, and yeah, I'd swatted her backside a couple of times along the way, just to make her stop squirming around. She looked ready to murder me. So, brave Lady Knight, what's your name? I asked, smirking. Vale, she spat through gritted teeth. Her rear was still stinging as I reached out to her, and she automatically recoiled. Her body had already been conditioned to dread my touch. Chill out, Unveil. Her eyes widened the moment I dropped her full name. Her final hope that I was oblivious to her true identity was completely shattered. She figured I had to have spies operating within Rima. Think about it. What kind of madman storms deep into hostile territory with a mere 300 soldiers and 0 intel? If Norrens had turncoats in its ranks, Rima bound to have moles as well. What's your angle? She demanded icily. I tipped her chin up with a single finger. Nothing major. Word is King Charles has a prodigy for a daughter. barely 16, yet already an intermediate mage. The absolute pride of the Ione lineage. She attempted to fight against her bindings. I pointed out that the cord was hexed. Scouted from the capital, it completely suppressed mana. Not that it mattered. Mages are useless without a wand. Anyway, her voice grew softer. Release my brother and me. Rima will make it worth your while. I smirked. Or I could just hand you over to the king of Norrance, who happens to be in a foul mood right now. You can guess what he'd do to a Rima princess today. Think it over, unveil. You really don't want him tracking you down, do you? King Zaluk the 13th was still livid when Rima's envoy arrived. He nearly refused to grant an audience. But even Norrance draws the line at executing diplomats. Initially, the envoy's message made no sense at all. Then came the inquiry that flipped the script. What terms will you demand to return our prince and princess? Zaluk's face clouded with confusion. He had absolutely no clue what they meant. But he played along since playing along meant free leverage. Why not? Totally. We'll treat your blue bloods with total respect. He slickly countered. Rima put up the Beager grasslands. That entire expanse past Furnace Bridge, where barely any herders lived. Zaluk pressed for more. Everything past George Fortress. The whole deal. That amounted to roughly a tenth of Rima's whole land. The envoy's face went completely white. Yet he agreed to pass along the terms. Once the diplomat left, Zaluk just sat there, trying to wrap his head around what actually went down. Apparently, someone on his own team had snatched a pair of Rima royals, right from George Fortress's front yard. But who? All of his dukes and counts were right by his side during the fight. Could some gutsy viscount have pulled this off? Or maybe a baron? He couldn't piece it together, though he figured whoever did it would show up to claim the bragging right soon. And hey, even if nobody stepped forward, well, saber-rattling was exactly what Norris did best. The spin worked flawlessly. Norris crushes Rima, bags 2 royals. Became the official narrative. The public had zero clue that the mission had actually been a total flop. Meanwhile, Baron Fedra was connecting the dots, and he didn't like what he saw. He'd been out in those woods too. He saw me pass up the deserted town and slip away. Then word broke about the captured royals. Only one person could have pulled that off. Me, with a mere 300 troops. He couldn't fathom how, but the timing and spot pointed straight at me. If I really did bag those royals, my career was about to hit the big time. The lifelong merchant had totally blown the deal of a lifetime. That son-in-law, blessed with insane talent and mind-blowing guts, was cast aside over a locked door and a half-hearted dinner invite. Right on Zaluk's cue, I packed the Ione siblings and Count Vane into a coach, making a frontline dash for the capital. 50 knights and Nora rode shotgun with me. My towering northern chargers definitely turned heads all along the way. The entire city was gossiping about which undercover noble had bagged the Rima royals. Yet nobody had the nerve to fake claim bragging rights for an achievement this massive. The palace receptionist, actually, recognized me from my previous run-in with the gladiator's emblem. He eyed my heavily armored escort and high-end steeds, parked outside, so I flipped him a gold piece. Kindly tell the king I'm requesting an audience. I've brought a little present. He peeked past my shoulder at 2 furious, tied-up youths, glaring daggers in dead silence, and his jaw dropped. The legend everyone was hyping up. Was this Green Baron? He scrambled off to pass the word. I wasn't kept waiting. I took a knee before King Zaluk 13. He scrutinized me closely, the very same Baron, who once bartered his family prestige for a grand in gold. Baron Linway Luika, Stantad. I raised my eyes. Behind me lined Count Vane and the Ione's pair. Zaluk could barely mask his sheer excitement. Holding these two as leverage, a huge slice of Rima's lands was basically a done deal for him. Even so, a hint of bewilderment crossed his face. How did a petty baron with barely a few hundred troops penetrate George fortress deep in hostile territory and bag 2 royals without taking a scratch? Was I low-key some closet Grand Magus? He looked over. I spotted a totally unexpected face. Dina Leah, the iconic elven sorceress, was lounging right in the throne room. She normally skips out on court, yet there she sat, sizing me up with intense, inquisitive eyes. I found out later that some academy kids had tipped her off about my arrival in the capital, and she figured out the whole puzzle right away. An armed-to-the-teeth Baron Lyca rolling in from the borderlands, making a direct line for the palace. It just had to be the mastermind behind the abduction. Saruka's mentor had taken an interest in me, and a pretty major one, to my amazement. Rima actually caved to Zaluk's ridiculous ultimatums, trying to seize that entire woodland by force. Would have been an absolute nightmare. Hidden lookouts in tree houses and underground bunkers. Bruondes Giriawafa. The price of conflict probably would have eclipsed the rewards. But thanks to yours truly, Zillick scored it all on a silver platter. The king even assigned me to personally guide both royals right to the exchange point. We rode out toward Furnace Bridge, where a contingent of roughly 100 Rima heavy cavalry was waiting to collect them. Those fully armored riders glared my way with pure venom. If I had advanced even a single pace closer, I probably would have ended up as their captive. Princess Ainville locked her gaze on me, her blue eyes filled with murder. The moment I gave a casual wave, she winced and steered her mount away, clearly remembering the spanking she got during the trip. I couldn't help but reminisce about how delightfully bouncy that whole ordeal was. Count Vane received no royal treatment whatsoever. Still tied up, he was tossed onto the dirt like a sack of potatoes. He didn't even dare to whimper. "Linwei Luca," the princess shouted back as she turned to depart. "I won't forget you. If we ever cross paths in battle and you end up in my clutches, I'll make sure you're well taken care of." She practically spat out those final words. Prince Peter, however, was much more composed. Putting aside our roles as adversaries, he genuinely seemed to admire my guts and clever tactics. He fully realized this capture had completely ruined his shot at the throne, yet he didn't seem all that bothered by it. He'd only been in the running because his mother pushed for it. "Linwei, I truly hope our paths cross again." They rode away toward the Rima guard detail, while I turned back, aiming for what I hoped looked like a cool, unfazed departure. Next came the sovereign's reward, the title of Viscount along with a massive tract of land that rivaled the size of an earl's domain. It was property seized from one of the purged, right-wing aristocrats, situated a long way from the Luca region, much closer to the southern Beastman tribes. It was obvious to everyone that I was being fast-tracked for an earldom. Down the line, I just needed to secure one more major feat, whether a triumph at arms or winning a gladiatorial tournament. But honestly, this whole bounty just gave me a massive headache. I had anticipated a modest viscountcy, perhaps. Instead, I was handed a sprawling estate that was bound to be a total fixer-upper, miles away from my headquarters, and I didn't have a single clerk or manager to run it. Heck, I hadn't even found an administrator for the Luca lands. Just yet, Vigland's arms sales couldn't possibly bankroll 2 run-down territories at the same time, and His Majesty hadn't spared a single gold piece for funding the startup costs. Clearly, the guy expected me to pull off another miracle. I left the routine management of Luca to our aging butler, while Norrell, my trusty knight, was now juggling both troop training and civic governance, essentially handling a baron's workload on a knight's rank. Fortunately, he took it on gladly. He had a completely clear read on the political climate. Since the right-wing faction was totally wiped out, the left-wing pretty much ran the entire show. Yet Nora was fully aware that a monarch would never permit a single group to gain more leverage than the throne itself. The left wing was likely to end up on the chopping block next. Zillick was going to require a brand new counterweight, and I was the most obvious choice for the job. A newly minted noble, completely free of political baggage, with a rock-solid track record and a flawless history, granting me the vast lands of an earl, while I only held the rank of a viscount, was the sovereign's precise way of backing my potential. Meanwhile, Saruka caught wind of my advancement over at the Magic Academy. She was absolutely stoked that I had risen to a viscount, off the back of a major wartime triumph. But a few anxieties crept in too. Managing 2 separate domains with nobody at the helm, she gave a moment's thought to studying governance, just to back me up, but she quickly shifted gears. Reaching the rank of Magus had to remain her top priority. As my social standing soared, she needed to grow powerful enough to truly stand by my side. Then a thought struck her. What if her mentor, the legendary Dean Alia, could give me a leg up with financial backing or skilled personnel? Alia stood as one of the most influential figures across the entire land, so she surely had plenty of assets to spare. The mere concept had Saruka practically bursting with hype. Back inside the academy walls, Alia had already figured out what Saruka wanted. Before a single word was uttered, the ancient elf had intentionally visited the audience chamber, not to engage in the debate, but to make a statement. Shrewd aristocrats like Count Pharos would clearly see that the mythical Grand Magus was personally keeping tabs on me. And Zillick would definitely get the memo too. Elia showing up without a word spoke volumes. What Alia probably didn't see coming was that the Pharaohs had totally assumed she and I were connected somehow. Like, maybe I was her secret kid. Hey, whatever works, right? Over tea, Alia gave Saruka her final thoughts. Linwei is the real deal. She'd stopped calling me the little baron. Just one meeting was enough to change her mind. Big time, she saw me as a guy with genuine grit and talent. And since Saruka was totally head over heels for me, she figured I could go pretty far, maybe even build my own empire down the line. My only real flaw was lacking any magical gift, but with Saruka around, that gap was filled. I'll dispatch some rogue mages to back him up. Elias said, think of it as an early wedding present. Saruka's face went completely crimson. Master, please don't say stuff like that in front of Linwei. When it came to cash, Saruka trusted me blindly. I mean, honestly, I'd managed to drop 5,000 gold for her tuition, and another 20,000 for advanced classes, without breaking a sweat. If I could pull that off from tiny, barren land, she knew I'd make miracles happen, given a bit more backing. Even, Aliyah found herself, actually excited to see how my story plays out. Watching a legend rise up. Not a bad way to kill a few centuries. Trade was booming, Big Lawn, and his crew had turned into an absolute cash cow, pumping out blades for the Far East Trading Company. Even after covering Saruka's school fees, I still had roughly 30,000 gold coins in the bank. Still, I knew that was peanuts for what was coming. The fresh region, once known as St. Martin, now rebranded as New Lucca, was an earldom-sized fief completely devoid of guards, ruling officials, or pretty much anything. Just a few remaining servants in a deserted fortress. So, for this initial rollout, I brought along my entire cavalry and 50 top-tier foot soldiers. I had the riders suit up in full barding. Before rolling in, gotta make that first impression count. The place was in rougher shape than I'd anticipated. In certain ways, but way better in others. Deserted fields and choked-out mines bordered the pathway. Yet, quite unlike the old look of fiefdom, this soil was actually rich and productive. I spotted parched ground, farming plots, and even fruit groves. This spot could easily feed itself without relying on imports. A massive plus for us. It bordered the southern Beastman lands, which totally explained why the earth was so fertile. The previous Earl had clearly slacked off and squandered all this potential. The township itself was vastly more advanced than anything I was accustomed to. Traders, shopkeepers, proper structures, a church, pubs, and even a local chapter of the Adventurers Guild. Adventurers meant skilled combatants. We'll be dropping by on the regular, and given my knack for spotting people's hidden gifts, this hub was a total goldmine for scouting talent. Alile sat right beside me in the coach, gazing out with wide-eyed wonder. She was genuinely thrilled for me. Still, I could catch a glimpse of something else behind that grin. As my rank climbed, my future bride would have to be a noblewoman of matching status. A simple maid could never marry a baron, much less a viscount. She had already accepted her fate of serving me, alongside my future lady. Yet that didn't entirely stop the quiet sting in her heart. The envy of an old childhood pal. My heavily armored battalions completely wowed the local shopkeepers, mercenaries, and the various minor factions around the region. Everyone stood at attention seeing my heavy cavalry. An elite guardsman parading past. The guy who bagged a pair of Rima Royals. With just 300 troops wasn't to be trifled with. And my gear made that plain as day. As we neared St. Martin Castle, I couldn't help but let out a whistle. A massive 2-story mansion boasting gorgeous gardens, fountains, scenic mini hills, and flawless lawns. More than 50 maids lined up in 2 straight rows at the gates. In perfect harmony, they bowed down and chimed. Welcome home, Lord Linwei. The aristocratic life is seriously something else. My top priority here in the New Lucca region was securing the city defenses. My 100 troops felt spread pretty thin. Across those massive ramparts, I had to sign up some fresh soldiers, militiamen, and logistics personnel ASAP. I instinctively looked around for Norrell, but then remembered he was stuck back in Old Lucca. Looks like I'll have to manage this all by myself. My roster of talent was painfully lackluster. The guards had boosted their combat attributes from drilling, but nobody had cracked 60 yet, and their tactical ratings hadn't budged an inch. No unique perks either. They had a hard cap. Maybe the slave market might yield something. New Lucca was a massive, earldom-sized domain, meaning it had a fully fledged slave auction house. I left Elialu at the estate, promoting her to head maid of New Lucca, with orders to whip those 50 resident maids into shape according to my tastes. She'd come back to me once they got up to speed. I walked out of the villa flanked by 2 guards, and pretty much immediately bumped into a guy in a dark cloak, standing right by my gate as he tossed back his hood. Good-looking face, wavy brown hair split down the middle, brown eyes just like your average Norris person, except his ears were slightly pointed. Greetings, Viscount Linwei. If I may introduce myself, I'm Naren Sel, a half-elf, a traveling mage, and I'm here to pledge my service. I glanced at his stats. Naren Sel, level 20 martial, 103 strategy loyalty at. 80 talents. Minor elemental affinity, advanced mage, grade A. Any sane person would smell a rat. A top-tier mage could easily serve dukes or even kings. So why show up for a newly minted Viscount? Yet his loyalty rating was already sitting at 80. Way higher than Aquinas or Saruka's when they first showed up. It made 0 sense unless someone had sent him over. Was I really just that incredibly charming? Well, whatever the deal was, an 80 loyalty score meant I had nothing to sweat about. Welcome, esteemed mage, I replied, skipping the interrogation entirely. He looked completely thrown off, having geared up for a heavy grilling, or maybe even getting turned away. He had no clue I could literally read his loyalty stats. What I didn't know back then was that Alia had sent him, disguised as a drifter. She had explicitly ordered him to act. Like he came on his own. I summoned the butler to escort Naren's cell inside the estate, telling the wizard he could claim whichever room he fancied. Naren's cell followed along, probably figuring I took him for some novice caster, and that he'd prove his real worth later on. Walking away with a high-level mage for free, I was feeling absolutely fantastic. Next stop, the slave market. A chubby manager walked out to welcome me with a broad grin. He was shocked that the renowned Viscount, who captured 2 Rama Royals, could be this young. What kind of slaves are you looking for? Viscount, the combat type, or companions? We've also got some rare exotic species, like dragonborn and lizard folk. This land was packed with all sorts of races, including beastkin variants boasting immense power, but low intellect, pretty pricey, and quite tough to break. Show me the humans, I told him. He guided me down a lengthy hallway into a massive chamber. The captives here seemed way healthier than Saruka and Aquina did back when I first ran into them. The majority were from the Rima or Yade tribes. The blue eyes and gray hair of the Rima instantly brought a specific princess to mind. Some pretty lively memories. The Yade clan had dark hair paired with tan skin. I checked out the room, but their stats were totally garbage. Nothing here was worth wasting cash on, and none of them had any unique traits. I'm not impressed, I informed the heavy-set man. He rubbed his palms together, leaning in close. Viscount, I actually have something top-tier hidden away. A unique find I intended to put up for public bidding. But seeing as you're already here, care to take a quick peek? I cross my heart. You won't be let down. What species? He flashed a knowing smirk, like we were sharing a guy's secret. A succubus, I swear. Look, I didn't tag along after that hefty dealer, just because I was lusting after a body. I was honestly just fascinated by a race I'd encountered in countless video games and anime. Back when I lived on Earth, he brought me to a section holding 5 separate pens for female succubi alongside a single male. They sprouted tiny wings from their backs, with sleek, black-tailed succubi originate from the eastern continent, where they have their own country. They're quite rare in Norrance, which turns them into luxury goods around here. Most of them boasted decent stats, with combat and strategy hovering around 40 to 50, but without any unique perks. I was just about to head out, feeling let down, when my gaze hit the final cage. My eyes went wide. I damn near lost my cool. Biddy, martial skill, 23. Abnormal strategy, 182. Abnormal affinity, 0. Talents. Dragon Tamer, Dragon Slayer. Empress, Transmigrator. Rank S. Man, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. She was totally passed out. Her parameters were flagged as glitches. And yet she still pulled an S-tier rating. The very first S rank I'd ever laid eyes on. Those 4 abilities were absolutely mind-blowing. And that final one, Transmigrator, did she come from Earth as well? I forced myself to play it cool. What are you asking for these succubi? I inquired nonchalantly. The big guy smirked. 10,000 gold for the girls, 12,000 for the guys. They hail from the faraway eastern continent, and every single one is a prime looker. He gestured toward Biddy's enclosure. The girl in the 5th cage is definitely the prettiest, but she keeps blacking out. Might be dealing with some bug. Honestly, I'd suggest the other 3 instead. I'll take that one, I countered, pointing straight at Biddy. Only she was worth that heavy price tag. The rest didn't even come close. 10,000 gold coins. That hurts. And the chubby dealer wouldn't knock off a single coin. Man, I was really hoping he would. Stepping out of the slave market, I took a stretch. This entire excursion had scored me exactly 1 purchase. Talk about hunting for high-value targets among slaves. Proved tougher than I expected. I was becoming way more selective. Mediocre stats just didn't cut it anymore. I needed top-tier attributes or exceptional skills. Maybe another trip to the Royal Knight Reserve was in order. Those guys were guaranteed to be elite prospects. Then again, scoring the King's blessing for a second draft would be a tough sell. So instead of heading straight back, I swung by the church and commissioned a priest to check out Baidi. I couldn't figure out what was causing her weird condition. But priests are the experts at healing and curing ailments. Honestly, I'd been wanting a permanent priest on the payroll. For a bit, they can mend troops using mana, making them just as rare and pricey as mages. But no one had signed up. And building a local chapel to get one station here would run me hundreds of thousands in gold. Guess I'll hit up the adventurers guild for a freelance healer down the road. Right now, I had a militia to muster. I put the word out, a single silver piece. As a signing bonus, guaranteed brand bread for daily meals. And proper combat gear for those who pass the test. For peasants used to chewing on rock-hard black bread, brand bread was pure luxury. Mix that with my clout. As the guy who captured 2 Rima royals, plus the imposing look of my heavily armored troops, and hopeful recruits came pouring in. By the afternoon, I'd signed up roughly 1,000 men. Out of the crowd, a pair of brothers caught my eye. Action, Martial 67, Strategy 60, Loyalty 70. Traits, Eagle Eye, Archery Mastery. Anchor, Martial 65, Strategy 70, Loyalty 70. Traits, Eagle Eye, Archery Mastery. Both worked as hunter-farmers, reputed as legendary sharpshooters in their village, who could hunt down deer by working together. They signed up because of my status. Norris respects pure power, and my reputation held some serious weight. Plus, once they checked out the pay and food, which beat anything any other lord offered, they were totally on board. I made both brothers squad leaders right then and there, and had them lead morning drills for the rookies. The former earl's practice fields behind the estate had enough housing for upwards of 3,000 troops, so crowding wasn't a problem. I ought to bring Norrell over from Luca's lands to manage the actual training, because I definitely couldn't handle it myself. Granted, that leaves old Luca without a captain for a bit, but things are pretty quiet around here lately. Meanwhile, the succubus finally came to, after being completely out cold for a whole week. Ellie Lou was right there waiting for her. The cleric I brought in couldn't quite figure out her ailment, though she'd been getting better on her own anyway. Little did I know back then, Bidee wasn't just some random succubus. She had ruled the succubus realm as empress for more than 3 centuries. Her senior council and closest allies turned on her, nearly taking her out with a lethal hex. She managed a narrow escape to the northern lands. She had also placed a neat little charm on herself, so anyone short of a grand magus rank who tried to mess with her while she was dead to the world would instantly blank on what they were up to. Pretty clever, she also shared a lifelink bond with a mighty frost dragon, whose healing energy was gradually cleansing the hex from her system. The moment she gets back on her feet, her plan was to return and string up every single traitor. When Alilu brought her some food, potato soup, a meat and veggie stew, plus white bread, Bidee realized she was getting special treatment, way better than what an ordinary slave would ever get. After spending 300 years living among humans, she knew exactly how nasty the nobility could be. Still, food was food. She wasn't sweating any poison threats either, all thanks to her protective ward. I had this meal whipped up specifically for her. Honestly, even I couldn't afford to eat like this every day. Meat stew was a total luxury, but I needed to win her over, so I went all out. Meanwhile, Norrell had traveled from Luca territory to coach Itchin and locked down his training routines. Man, those 2 brothers caught on fast. Norrell was seriously impressed, even a bit blown away, by my knack for spotting raw talent in a crowd. After a couple of days, he headed back home, and 1,000 fresh recruits kicked off their daily slashing, thrusting, and sparring sessions with wooden swords. Norrell also sent over a shipment of 1,000 brand new longswords forged in Big Lawn. As for the armor, I plan to buy it from the Far East Trading Company. Sure, Big Lawn could manufacture armor too, but making a full set just took too long. His time was better spent hammering out swords to sell. Funds were getting low once again. Bigland's output alone couldn't cover the steep price of equipping a massive army. The local tax revenue from our lands only brought in a few hundred gold coins a month. After handling expenses, basically pocket change, I wanted heavy cavalry, an elite mage guard, and maybe even a Griffin Rider unit down the road. But, heck, even King Zillick only commanded a few thousand Griffin Riders. They were the ultimate ace up his sleeve, never deployed. Outside of massive wars, man, dreams sure cost a fortune. Young master, the succubus lady has finally woken up. Yahello called out behind me, telling me to look after her. I muttered back, pretty intrigued by Biddy myself, especially that bizarre transmigrator talent of hers. However, I had a much more urgent matter to deal with right then. Count Pharaohs had unexpectedly dropped by for a visit. I'd only run into the guy twice during the entire autumn campaign, so I had absolutely no clue what he wanted. Still, he was a count, and since I was just a viscount, I had to mind my manners. Esteemed Count Pharaohs, it is a true pleasure to meet you. Likewise, Viscount Linway. He gave me a warm smile, even though he'd been cooling his heels for half an hour. As he closely scrutinized me, I got the distinct impression that he was searching for some sort of link between Alia and myself. He didn't spot any elven features, though, just my blonde hair, which really isn't all that rare in Norse. Once the pleasantries were out of the way, he got right to the point. I'm looking to set up a trade. Partnership with the new Looka territory. And let my merchant caravans do business around here. That felt way too basic to justify making a personal trip. His own lands were situated right near the capital, boasting far superior markets. Meanwhile, New Looka was isolated and sat right on the Beastman border. What was his real angle? Before I could even try to figure it out, he laid his actual offer on the table. If you agree to this, those 300 northern warhorses I brought with me are all yours. Just a token of our friendship. 300 horses valued at 300 gold pieces each. That added up to a whopping 90,000 gold coins. I nearly choked on the spot. Was I his secret, long-lost kid or something? Noticing my utter bewilderment, he quickly added, Miss Saruka has been coaching my daughter in the magical arts. So look at this as a gesture of gratitude for her guidance. Please, don't turn it down. Suddenly, the pieces fell into place. He was fully aware of my ties to Saruka, and by extension, my connection to Alia. This massive gift was just his way of sucking up to the legendary Grand Magus. By using me as the middleman, naturally, no aristocrat just parts with 90,000 gold pieces worth of steeds. For absolutely nothing, but whatever. If he's handing them over, far be it from me to refuse. Once Count Pharaoh took his leave, I felt pretty good about our talk. We actually hit it off nicely. Granted, I knew better than to get too cozy with the left-wing faction, since if they ever faced a downfall, just like the right-wingers recently did, anybody linked to them would go down in flames as well. Yet Pharaoh didn't seem to be scouting me for the left wing. He was playing a lone hand, attempting to forge a private bond through Saruka and Alia, and besides, those 300 chargers were already mine. There was no way I was returning them. With 1,000 troops and 300 mounts, I could finally assemble a proper heavy cavalry unit. Mind you, honestly, a mere 1,000 soldiers was still laughably meager. For a domain fit for an earl, I needed at least 5,000 to look like the real deal. But armies require serious funding, and I hadn't even lined up my next revenue stream yet. I went over to check up on Biddy. She turned out lovelier than I'd anticipated. The moment I stepped inside, she was reading one of my volumes near the window, with the sunshine illuminating her flaxen hair. Those tiny black wings, roughly 2 spans across, rested on her back while her rounded, dark tail twitched in a strangely rhythmic cadence, curling and flicking as if it possessed its own agenda. She was still sporting the slave band, though I had a hunch it meant zilch to her, and she didn't address me as master. Hey there, I greeted her casually. Greetings, Viscount Linway. She countered. I didn't push the issue regarding the honorific, since I already knew from her status screen that she was an empress, a dragon master, and a dragon executioner. Going looking for trouble with someone like that will be a total bonehead move. We had a quick chat about the novel she was reading. She spoke with an effortless blend of chill vibe and grace, with zero submissive attitude whatsoever, which figures, considering she used to be royalty, and a world hopper, who's been living around here for over 3 centuries. Make yourself comfy, I told her, and took off. I didn't pry for intel, just wanted to make my presence known, and let her settle in. Her approval rating was still pretty low, and I hadn't quite cracked the code on boosting it yet. No rush, though. What I missed was that once I walked out, her favorability toward me bumped up by 5 points. Turns out, just treating her like a regular human being, instead of a piece of property, was enough to leave a mark. Winter was closing in fast. Faint snow flurries were already falling from overcast skies. Winters in Norris are no joke. Massive snowfall shuts down every road for months. If the peasants didn't store up enough rations in the fall, they could starve. Unlike the old Looka region, which lacked any agricultural land, New Looka actually featured fields and fruit gardens. That meant I had agricultural workers to care for. So, I had the steward put up a notice. Anyone open to working at the estate over the winter would get 3 copper pieces a day, plus 3 square meals. That offer was sweet enough to bring in every local farmer. There was plenty to do, from feeding the mounts, to clearing away snow, and helping the kitchen crew prep meals for 1,000 troops. These tasks used to fall entirely on the 50 maids, under the old Earl, working from sunrise until they dropped. I shook things up. The maids only focused on keeping the castle clean. Talk about a massive upgrade from the former Earl of St. Martin. I bet I looked like a total angel to them. That deep gratitude of theirs flipped right into pure loyalty. Sure, I could have just handed the farmers free rations, but I didn't want them seeing it as a handout. Folks value what they actually work for, so I set up actual jobs for them instead. It was a fair deal. Keep everyone alive through the winter, while keeping their pride fully intact. If my goal was to expand this domain and enlist more troops by next year, building something meant to last, I needed way more than just a rep for being brave. I needed to establish myself as a lord who genuinely gives a damn about his people. Most of the aristocrats around here will bleed their peasants dry for every single cent. But growing up back on Earth definitely gave me a whole different spin on that. Even now, sitting right at the top of the social ladder, I just couldn't bring myself to copy how the local nobles act. Then the very first snowfall blanketed the entire New Luca territory overnight. From right outside the villa, the sound of kids playing drifted through the hearth smoke. This was exactly the kind of cozy vibe I wanted for this place. The snow wasn't heavy enough to shut down travel just yet, but give a month or two and the roads would be buried. For the upcoming 4 months of winter chill, my boots made a crisp crunching sound in the fresh powder. The moment I stepped outdoors, Alilu trailed quickly behind me holding a gray cloak. Her cheeks flushed pretty pink from the frosty air. She was all bundled up in a thick winter coat over her maid uniform, completely hiding the lovely views I usually got to enjoy. Bummer, but a minor loss. Local farmers were already arriving for seasonal winter labor. Over at the estate, heading over to the training fields located out back, I stood and observed the fresh recruits running drills. Honestly, their baseline stats weren't half bad at all. Most were warrior-minded young guys around 30. With the right training, they'd easily hit 50, likely outclassing my original bodyguards, who were mostly middle-aged. Action and Anchor were busting their humps the most. Getting bumped up to squad leaders had really lit a fire under them. If they kept grinding like this, knighthood was pretty much a done deal. The rest of the recruits were hustling hard too. No one wanted to slack off. Right in front of me, the silver coins and bran bread I'd promised them were handed over without a hitch. For guys raised on basic black bread, this was pure luxury. Up on the ramparts, my veteran soldiers saluted me with genuine admiration. These were the same men present when I seized the Rama royalty. They trusted me completely now, maybe even a bit too much. They had begun treating my commands as sacred truth, certain that following me meant guaranteed victory. Whenever they hit the tavern off duty and spun their war stories, the local townsfolk hung on their every word. It gave their egos a nice boost. From the battlements, I scanned the terrain. Snow-draped fields, a stretch of low woods dotted with hunting shacks, and past all that abroad, swift river teeming with piranhas. A perfect natural defense. Beastman territory lay just on the other side. The Otto tribe used to ford those waters constantly, to pillage us, but they've been dead quiet for nearly a decade. That stillness made me uneasy. The calmer the waters, the rougher the storm brewing underneath. Meanwhile, over at the Magic Academy, Saruka had just secured her advanced mage credentials. She had enrolled in the academy during late summer and pulled off what most folks don't manage in a whole lifetime, all before the winter chill even arrived. Renee, her mentor, passed over the badge with a beaming, proud smile. You just might end up the youngest Grand Magus this land has ever seen, Renee remarked to her. Saruka merely grinned. Becoming a Grand Magus felt light years away. The only thing that mattered right now was Alia's promise of a week-long break. The moment she secured her advanced ranking, she'd finally get to go home. Sadly, though, since the paths were completely blocked with snow, she was stuck waiting until springtime. She'd actually asked Alia about using teleportation magic, but the elderly elf just gave her a sharp flick on the forehead. Quit messing around with forbidden incantations. Then, a totally uninvited voice ruined her day. Lady Saruka, I've finally tracked you down. You are as gorgeous as a blossoming rose. One glance, and I'm utterly captivated. It was Prince Michel, one of Zillick's younger boys, who also studied at the academy. Ever since Saruka made a name for herself, he had been completely obsessed with chasing her. He'd even put on a massive public confession, right in front of the whole student body. She had shot him down instantly, yet he kept staging these accidental run-ins, no matter how many times she rejected his advances. Prince Michel, as I've told you before, I'm focusing strictly on my coursework. Dating is the last thing on my mind right now. Well, that wasn't 100% accurate. She just wasn't into him. Not a single noble had given her the time of day, back before she proved her incredible skills. Only one person had truly stood by her side. When she was at rock bottom, her mind was made up that her path lay by my side. Your voice sounds as gorgeous as always, Michelle uttered with a well-rehearsed grin. You just haven't gotten to know me yet. I'll be back. He didn't dare press his luck further. His old man had given him strict warnings, never to cross Duchess Aaliyah. Still, Michelle remained pretty confident. Good looks, noble lineage, and absolute persistence. He assumed a sheltered girl, like Saruka, would eventually cave to his devotion. In reality, he just wanted Saruka's influence, to give him an edge, against his older brother for the crown. She was merely a pawn to him, not a human being. He had no clue. He'd already lost before the match even began. Heading down from the ramparts, I crossed paths with Naren's cell, my latest sorcerer. He'd been cooped up in his quarters, poring over spells ever since he got here, and he was completely bored stiff. Naren's cell, any interest in managing my affairs? I inquired. He declined with a shake of his head. I'm a magical scholar, not some paper pusher, though I could school some magical trainees for you, provided you scout out the right talents. Fair enough. Magic pupils required high tactical stats, and ideally distinct gifts. Otherwise, the drain on time and gold just wasn't worth it. I nodded, but the budget issue kept weighing on me. It wasn't like I could pull another big lawn out of thin air. His unique courage-forged legacy made him irreplaceable. Typical dwarven blacksmiths couldn't match his caliber. The cold season proved tougher than I bargained for. I figured recruiting peasants for winter labor would get everyone through the frost. But the fortress's grain reserves dropped to scary levels. The former earl's warehouses had been totally stripped during the cleanup, leaving next to nothing. My steward proposed starving the farmers just to feed the garrison. Yeah, I couldn't pull that off. I had a whole reputation for being both tough and kind. Bailing on them now would completely wreck the trust I'd built up. Starting something only to quit halfway through was honestly worse than never trying at all. So, I figured out a loophole. Hunting. The snow-covered woods were crawling with rabbits, mice, and deer. I sent my 1,000 troops out there with longbows. It doubled as solid practice between them and the local woodsmen. By the end of winter, the forest was practically picked clean. The hunters were bound to face a rough season because of it. But hey, they'd always been the wealthiest folks in the region anyway. Regardless, I prepare much better for next winter. This mess wouldn't happen again. Springtime finally rolled around. The snow thawed out, and I could finally breathe. I had barely managed to keep my word. We seriously needed to cultivate more wheat and hoard rations for the days ahead. Auction and Anchor had made some incredible progress. Over the winter, Auction hit 79 in martial stats, while Anchor reached 75. That's still below average, but comfortably above most members of the Royal Knight Reserves. The 1,000 fresh recruits had all leveled up to about 40. In terms of martial power, meaning they could swing Bigland's heavy broadswords with ease, 300 of them had been practicing their horsemanship to form the cavalry. Honestly, the only thing missing was actual battlefield experience. With no bandits anywhere nearby, I couldn't give them a proper baptism by fire. Meanwhile, back over in the Luka territory, Saruka finally returned home. The second the snow cleared up enough for travel, she hopped onto a carriage bound straight for Luka territory. She was officially an advanced mage now, donning her own mage robes and wielding a legit wand. Courtesy of Alia, a small squad of elite guards accompanied her. Also sorted out by Alia, though she didn't really need them. A single advanced mage could easily take down hundreds of armored troops. Out in the open, her carriage didn't display any family crest. Alia's strict orders, even for a trip back home. No one should link Saruka to me. It'll just cause trouble. When she reached the Luka territory, she presented my knight's badge to the gate guards, the one I had given her, and they let her pass. Aquina, she called out. The two cat girls reunited with a massive hug. Aquina's eyes welled up. Saruka, you've really changed, Aquina said softly. It was true. That shy, fearful girl was gone. Saruka still kept her gentle warmth, but all the self-doubt and hesitancy had completely left her eyes. Where's the master? Saruka asked, glancing toward my old quarters. Nora walked in. He's at the new Luka territory. Didn't you know? Saruka's face fell. Right, I wasn't just some minor baron anymore. I was a viscount with a whole second domain. She had already spent over a day traveling from the capital, and New Luka was even further away. Her precious week of time off was slipping away fast. Without a second thought, she grabbed Aquina's hand. Come on, let's go find him together. Why didn't realize back then was that massive trouble was brewing in the shadows. Prince Michel, the same annoying pest who'd been pestering Saruka at the academy, was cooking up something way worse than just a failed romance. The moment his spies reported that Saruka had left the capital, heading down south, he attempted to trail her. But there was no creeping up on a high-tier mage. without getting spotted. Yet his actual plot had zero to do with Saruka. He'd been having low-key meetings with a beastman, cleric from the Auto tribe named Monreed, a canine-faced fighter with razor-sharp teeth, who didn't give a damn about human royalty. Michelle was the mastermind who set up the right wing. Duke sellout during the autumn offensive, leaking intel straight to Rima. Once his old man survived, Michelle had to pivot. His latest strategy? Secure the appointment as commander of Blackstone Fortress. That massive, beastly defensive bastion sitting right behind my new look of lands. It's the lone barrier, stopping the beastman hordes from storming the capital. The moment he took charge, he'd throw open the gates for the Auto tribe's onslaught. Those beastmen would just blitz right to the capital, while Zeluk's primary forces were tied up elsewhere, holding down the newly acquired Rima territories. Michelle figured his dad and big brother would be completely crushed before they even knew what hit him. Blackstone Fortress rivaled Rimus, George Fortress in scale, and as long as it held, the beastmen couldn't pose a threat to the capital. But Michelle intended to serve it up on a silver platter. He didn't give a second thought to the minor lords, situated between the stronghold and the frontier, completely writing me off as an obstacle worth sweating over. The invasion was locked in for April of next year. In the meantime, Fatty spent the entire winter laying low out in my domain. I scarcely dropped by to see her. Nearly all my time was swallowed up by drilling troops and grinding through administrative work. Even so, I made damn sure the cooks remembered her tastes. Unsalted potato soup and bread baked extra soft and fluffy. Little details caught her eye. She dined on way better food as the succubus empress. Exotic, magical beasts routinely serve at her table. Yet she genuinely valued the gesture. She resolved to return the favor down the line, whenever I truly needed backup. For the time being, she mostly kept a low profile. Over the months, she gradually bonded with the local crew, LOLO, who kept trying to cook alongside her. The Action Brothers, who couldn't piece a coherent sentence together. Around her, and Narnsel, the quiet half-elf mage. Then springtime rolled around, bringing along two cat girls she'd never set eyes on before. Saruka showed up tightly gripping my arm, her tail wrapping around my calf every now and then, before letting go. Almost as if she were channeling months of longing, through pure touch. Aquina tagged along right behind, reconnecting with Yahello after a whole winter apart. Are you liking it at the academy? I asked Saruka. What I really meant to ask was if anyone had been messing with her. But honestly, with Aaliyah as her instructor, that felt pretty unlikely. I am, she replied, but nowhere near as happy as when I'm with you. I peeked at her status panel and nearly choked. Saruka, Martial Tier 10. Strategy, 168. Rank, S. Affinity, 100. Talents, Magical Affinity. Wisdom's Blessing. Well-traveled, Advanced Mage. Her strategy stat had skyrocketed, hitting an S rank now, and her loyalty stat had switched over to Affinity. Just like Biddy's, her sheet used a totally different scale, and it was completely maxed out at 100. That totally explained why she was acting so incredibly clingy. Back when she left, she'd been super respectful and a little timid. At this point, she was leaning right into my arm, totally oblivious to whoever might be watching. What on earth had they been teaching her at that academy? Honestly, I had to keep it real with myself. Catching feelings for Saruka was never part of the plan. Covering her tuition and granting her a knightly title were just cold, calculated moves to guarantee her loyalty. It's not like I was some good guy. I'd literally bought her from a slave trader, solely to exploit her raw potential. If she hadn't been so remarkably gifted, she'd still be rotting away in a cage somewhere. But somehow or another, things just kept veering off in completely wild directions. Master, who might this be? Saruka suddenly piped up, locking her eyes on Bai D. Bai D was startled for a second, but played it cool. I'm Bai D, a slave purchased by the Viscount. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Saruka. Saruka addressing me, as Master caught Bai D's attention instantly. She figured this cat girl was likely another slave I'd picked up. Except this one was a high-tier mage with frightening talent. I could tell Bai D's gears were turning behind that calm grin. A high-level half-elf mage staying at my estate. A prodigy cat girl mage calling me master. Plus elite heavy cavalry stationed right outside. This was definitely not how your average Viscount's household operated. She was definitely beginning to ponder what kind of man I actually was. I fully anticipated Saruka trying to creep into my room again. Given her track record, it made sense. What caught me off guard was Yahello tagging along too. The pair of them stood by my doorway, clutching pillows, looking completely miserable. Young master. Master, I massaged my temples. Can't sleep? Saruka gave a nod. The howling wind out there's crazy. Saruka's terrified. An advanced mage spooked by wind. Seriously? Could we at least come up with a more believable excuse? I glanced at Alilu, waiting for her explanation. I just wanted to remember what it was like. Snoozing right next to you back when we were kids. See, she and I share the exact same birthday, and we were practically attached at the hip until I turned 6. Honestly, I used to think she was my actual sister. But then she started wearing a maid uniform, and it clicked that my old man had basically assigned her to me. We eventually stopped co-sleeping by the time we hit 10. There was no denying it. Both of them were gorgeous. Even for a guy like me, who was constantly surrounded by stunning women. I had to admit they were 100% my type. Fine, just this once. I nudged the door open, and they scurried inside like a pair of rabbits. The mattress was plenty spacious for the 3 of us, but I've never really been a fan of sharing my sleeping space. Heck, I don't even know what my own sleep habits are like. Then again, when pretty girls ask so sweetly, you gotta make an exception. I drifted off, still weighed down by my usual anxieties. I ended up having an absolute nightmare. Some kind of hairy monster pinned down my arms, legs, and neck until I was practically suffocating. Next thing I knew, I was tossed into the water, where these slimy, tiny fish kept brushing all over my face. By the time the morning sun woke me up, I felt like I'd barely survived. The girls were still dead to the world. And man, their sleeping positions were something else. I carefully untangled myself from the mess of limbs. They were draped all over me. The head maid had already set up breakfast out in the hall. Just some toasted white bread and jam. Bai and Aquina were already sitting at the table. Aquina was just eating like normal, but Bai was giving me this bizarre look, almost as if she was seeing a total stranger. Right then, Saruka and Alila both walked out of my bedroom, and the head maid just stayed completely silent. Aquina's eyes went wide, while Bai chilled out. Looks like this was way more in line with her view on how human aristocrats actually acted. I took a seat with a sheepish smirk. No way was I going to explain that nothing went down. And honestly, even if it had, I'm a nobleman crashing in my own bed with my own maid. What's a big deal? No biggie, right? Saruka could only stick around for 2 days before taking off. Her time off was already up, and she'd likely get there a day late. As things stood, she needed to master Magus tier magic and become someone Alia couldn't possibly look down on. Only then could she come back to my side for good, without needing anyone's okay. Master, I'm heading out now. She waved and hopped into her carriage with her guards. I had Aquina stay behind, rather than sending her back to the Luca lands. Those 300 horses from Count Pharaoh still needed breaking in, so her gift for beast taming was absolutely crucial. Just then, the butler brought up a new matter. My lord, the annual Golden Eagle Gladiator Tournament is coming up in a month. Taking the crown meant scoring a Golden Eagle crest, free perks at local shops, solid discounts at the major trading firms, and a personal favor from the king. It was the exact same crest my granddad, Edward, had won, and that I had pawned away. The rules only permitted hand-to-hand combat. No magic allowed. If anyone on my crew was going to sign up, it would have to be normal. Even so, I decided against letting anyone enter. My grandfather was hailed as a sword saint back then, yet he still fell on the battlefield. Lone strength has its boundaries. In this realm, even the most formidable dragons get brought down by bands of warriors, chasing after glory. Even if tons of wannabe dragon slayers bite the dust trying, assembling a powerful military counted way more than a single tournament win. In a realm where conflict might break out at any second, united military might was your only ticket to survival. Solo heroics were honestly hyped up. I just sit out the tourney. Smarter to use that month whipping more troops into shape.